Chapter 1021. After tearing down half of the hotel, Renbachian had to bring Hua back to the villa in Shishan in the middle of the night. He originally thought that the hotel would be closer to the competition, but it seemed like it was a good thing that the villa wouldn't be torn down. Although he rarely came here, he and the Empress had lived here for a long time, so he cherished this villa. If Hua tore down this villa, she would probably be beaten up a few more times. Renbachian didn't change his room, so he got someone to clean up another room for Hua. Hua was full of energy again in the time it took to get from the hotel to the villa. She started yelling and running around the house. She had always been more energetic than ordinary children. In terms of noise, she had the fighting power of 10 naughty children. In terms of demolishing a house, she was equivalent to strengthening a company. However, what gave Renbachian the biggest headache was that she didn't have a good memory. It wasn't easy for her to remember for 3 days, and most of the time, she only had a memory of 3 minutes. Just like now. "Father, what's this? Father, this is so beautiful. Father, can I hold this? Father, is this delicious? Can I try it? Put that grenade down." Renbachian was getting a headache from her noise and really wanted to pick her up and give her another beating. He and the Empress weren't noisy people, so he didn't expect their child to be so noisy. Before going to bed, Renbachian used the Internet Access Device, a device that could project images into the air, to take a look online. Sure enough, there were reports and discussions about Hua everywhere. As for today's Olympic competition, no one mentioned it. Renbachian rubbed his head, listened to the rummaging sounds in the supermarket, and chased Hua back to her room to sleep. A few minutes after he went back to his room, he heard Honeysuckle's footsteps in front of the door. In the darkness, he could see half of Honeysuckle's face sticking out of the door frame. It was completely blocked by his hair, and it was quite scary in the dark. "Father, I can't sleep alone." Hua pouted. "Didn't you sleep alone in Wuji City?" Renbachian sat up and said angrily. Hua was speechless. She rolled her eyes and said in a timid tone, "I'm a stranger. This pillow is too unfamiliar." Renbachian twitched his mouth, sighed, and patted the place beside him. "Sleep here, don't mess around." "Alright." Honeysuckle cheered and jumped onto the bed. "Father, can you tell me a story?" Honeysuckle couldn't stay still for more than a few minutes. His eyes were shining in the dark. Renbachian looked at her expectant gaze, thought for a while, and said, "Let me tell you a story about Calabash Brothers and Snow White. A long, long time ago, an old man planted a calabash vine. Just like that, Calabash Brothers defeated Snow White and lived a happy life with Baldy Chong." After Renbachian finished telling the story, there was no more sound around him. He turned his head and saw that Honeysuckle had fallen asleep with his arms and legs spread out. "I finally fell asleep." Renbachian felt a headache coming on. In fact, at the Earthwheel level, the need for water was much less than that of an ordinary person. 2 hours a day was enough. However, Honeysuckle still needed more sleep. Sleeping was also a time for her to absorb the power in her body. He closed his eyes and entered his knowledge sea. At this time, there was an additional laboratory on the planet. There were all kinds of equipment inside. A large number of computers were placed inside, all of which were turned on. Although this place belonged to him alone, he still made it look like it was his own. He first checked the data on the computer and then opened another door. It was a room that covered an area of thousands of square meters. There were huge pipes and equipment everywhere. In the middle of the room was a round metal device that was erected vertically. It was a nuclear reactor. That's right, Renbachian was making nuclear bombs in his own world with the nuclear technology that he had obtained. It should be said that Renbachian was in his own world, using unlimited resources and thinking to control everything in the entire world to deduce Earth's technology. Now, in his mind, some of the technologies had been deduced to around the year 2000. Of course, he had only mastered a few of the more important technologies. As for the equipment, he used the principles and blueprints to make them directly. He would leave these things to the people of Dayo. He wasn't going to take these technologies out directly. He was only using this method to imprint some things in his mind and make the advancement of Dayo's technology a little easier. After staying in his mind for 4 hours, Rinpoche returned to the real world and felt a small foot suddenly appear on his waist. Bang! Rinpoche was kicked into the wall. He turned to look at Hua, who was sleeping soundly on the bed and drooling on half the pillow. This sleeping posture wasn't like his or the Empress's, but more like Lin Xiaola's. Rinpoche simply lay on the floor and slept. He was a little tired from staying in his sea of knowledge for 4 hours, so he fell asleep soon after. While half asleep, Rinpoche realized that it was daybreak. Hua sat up at the head of the bed and rubbed her sleepy eyes. She looked around and quickly found Rinpoche lying on the floor. She immediately laughed. "Father, father." Hua moved, squatted on Rinpoche's stomach, and pulled his face. "Stop fooling around." Rinpoche pushed her hands away and said without opening his eyes, "Go get dressed and wash up. I will check you later." "Oh." Honeysuckle pouted and stepped out of the door. She was squatting on Rinpoche's stomach. This sudden action almost made Rinpoche spit out a mouthful of blood. "Hua." Rinpoche's face turned green as he jumped up from the floor. Where was Hua? Suppressing the urge to beat her up again, Rinpoche washed up first, leaned against the headboard, and turned on the internet. Sure enough, most of the news that he saw was about Hua. He also saw a bunch of people calling him father-in-law. Rinpoche smacked his lips. If someone could really marry Hua, there was no chance. Hua was the next emperor of Dayo. She might even become the emperor in the future, just like the emperor in the history of that world. With Hua's talent, it wasn't impossible. Soon, the corner of Rinpoche's eyes twitched. If others saw this, they would realize that they had the same expression as the Empress when she wanted to kill someone. However, Rinpoche didn't have that kind of thought at this moment. He was just a little surprised. His identity had actually been dug out by someone. Primary school, middle school, high school, university, and that year's work history. Of course, the most eye-catching one was the director of the Dayo dojo. Baidu searched for the novel website of Yunlai Pavilion, allowing you to experience the latest and fastest novel chapters. All novels were updated in seconds. Chapter 1022. Not only did they dig out his identity, but they also pointed out that there were many Earth-class experts in Dayo Martial Arts School. Although there were hundreds of Earth-class experts in Dayo Martial Arts School, no more than 10 of them were known to the public. Even so, it still caused a heated discussion. One had to know that in China, an Earth-rank martial artist was just a legend. According to the news, the person who leaked his identity claimed to be his classmate, and it wasn't just one person. The informant put all the information together to form this piece of news. Although the name wasn't mentioned, Rinpoche knew that the informant was probably his classmate. After all, there were a few things in the news that he only remembered after reading this article. However, it didn't matter. Calculating his age, his classmate should be in his 50s by now. Rinpoche's face darkened as he continued to flip through the news. There were some statements in the news that were out of his expectations. When martial arts are in the hands of a few people, it becomes the gap between the nobles and the commoners. We are not born equal. There were many posts on the internet accusing some people of holding martial arts in their hands and forming the gap between the new generation of nobles and the commoners. Some people were born with powerful martial arts and reached the earth class at a young age. As for ordinary people, they learned ordinary martial arts released by the country and had to join the army or a functional department to learn more advanced martial arts. In summary, they were chasing after the shadows of others for their whole life. Just like the ordinary people in ancient times, they didn't even have the opportunity to learn. It was the same for martial arts. The descendants of ordinary people didn't even have the opportunity to see those advanced martial arts. There was a huge gap between them and others from birth. These kinds of comments actually appeared quite a lot in one night. On the surface, it was referring to the 2 flowers that appeared in the Olympics, but in fact, all the martial arts were released by the country. The purpose was clear. In addition, there was another kind of comment that added fuel to the fire. There was a huge gap between experts and ordinary people. Experts could break the rules at will, just like the girl who appeared in the competition. Ordinary people couldn't even see her figure clearly. Would the country have the ability to stop and arrest such people after they committed crimes? Would the country use the law to restrain and punish such powerful martial artists? As long as one was strong enough, they could break the rules. Coupled with the previous statement that some people were born with high-level cultivation techniques, they were completely separated from ordinary people by an invisible wall. Ordinary people would not be able to break this wall even if they used their entire life's effort. Success caused many people to discuss, worry, and unease. This was only in the morning. The situation would probably worsen in the evening. Someone is causing trouble. Renbachien immediately understood what was going on. Renbachien raised his eyebrows and watched the news for an entire hour. He pondered in his heart. Last night, everyone, including Yang Sen, appeared very relaxed. He wondered if they had anticipated such a situation beforehand. No, they definitely knew. This kind of thinking should not have appeared in a day or two. After all, cultivation methods had been spread on Earth for more than 20 years. There should have been people who had thought about this problem a long time ago. It was just that it had been suppressed previously. This time, it was Duo Hua's entrance into the arena that detonated the bomb. If the higher-ups didn't agree, there wouldn't be so many posts on the internet. He didn't know what the higher-ups were thinking. He thought about it for a while and started to scratch his head. As a prince of Dayo, his status wasn't lower than those higher-ups. However, in reality, the situation they faced was completely different. That world was even more backward. The people weren't intelligent and had very little access to information. There were very few schemes in Dayo. Those rough men couldn't do such technical work. The people of Dayo were straightforward. They spoke with their fists or their voices. What Renbachien did was to guide their technological development and drive the direction of Dayo's development. He was used to the situation in Dayo. Even though he was in a high position, there was no improvement in this aspect. Therefore, he couldn't guess the intentions of the nation. However, Renbachien knew one thing. This time, he had unknowingly become a fuse and might have become a gun in the hands of some people. As for the hands behind the gun, on the surface, they seemed to be the people who were causing trouble. They might have long been dissatisfied and wanted the world to be in chaos. It could also be other nations. In reality, the hands that were holding the gun were still the nation. At the thought of this, Renbachien completely threw this matter aside. In this aspect, even 100 of him couldn't compare to that group of people. He would just sit back and watch the situation develop. Even how the situation developed wasn't important to him. The only troublesome thing was that he originally planned to send Hua to kindergarten. After such a storm, it wouldn't be good for her to show her face. Renbachien turned on his communication device, and a moment later, his assistant appeared in the air in front of him. I want Hua to go to kindergarten. With the current situation, it's not convenient for her to show her face. Is there any way? Renbachien asked directly. Boss, you can open a kindergarten yourself. The assistant on the screen was slightly surprised and said with a smile. When Renbachien heard this answer, he smacked his head. He had forgotten about this simplest method. What about the students? I don't want Hua to be the only one in the kindergarten. Boss, many of the students in the martial arts center have children. Just let them send their children to kindergarten. Renbachien suddenly saw the light. The students in his martial arts center were still relatively reliable. After all, their follow-up martial arts were all in the martial arts center. Furthermore, the martial arts center had nurtured them for so many years and was extremely powerful. As a result, they were very united. Hua and their offspring would go to kindergarten together, and the teachers in the kindergarten would be arranged by Renbachien. Naturally, there wouldn't be any problems. Go and make the arrangements. As soon as possible. As for the location, there are still many empty floors in the building. Find a floor for the kindergarten. Renbachien directly threw the matter to the assistant. Once this matter was resolved, other things didn't matter anymore. Father, where are we going to play today? Hua had changed her clothes and appeared in front of Renbachien bouncing around. She looked very cheerful, and her eyes were full of anticipation. She had completely forgotten what she had just done. Come, let's play bamboo stir-fried meat first. Ren Baqian smiled kindly. He hadn't forgotten that she had used his stomach as a bed just now. For the next few days, Ren Baqian would still bring Hua to the competition. However, this time, he had to dress her up a little. He changed her into a blue sportswear. In addition, he had informed some departments to arrange a more secluded location, so the cameras wouldn't capture this place. Although the internet was still abuzz, it didn't affect him at all when he brought Hua to watch the competition. Men's 100 meters for 7 seconds. Women's 100 meters for 6 seconds. Men's shot put, 66. For meters. Women's shot put, 64. 2 meters. Men's weightlifting, 368 kilograms in the snatch, 437 kilograms in the clean and jerk. It could be said that this year's Olympic Games had completely exceeded the limits of mankind. Through this year's Olympic Games, everyone could see what the human body could achieve. However, this was only the Xian level. Above the Xian level, there was the Earth level and the Heaven level. People had already guessed the strength of the Earth level based on the video of Hua and Ren Baqian breaking into the competition. Instantaneous burst of power, within 1.5 seconds of 100 meters. Of course, a strong individual wasn't omnipotent. The national football team was eliminated in the first round. The whole nation was shocked. Baidu search 081 Chinese network yen. No advertising message. Chapter 1023. Chao Wenji left the martial arts field with sweat all over his body. He returned to his room to take a shower and change his clothes. Then he turned on the internet. News and pictures appeared one after another. He ignored them and just pulled up a short video from his personal folder. A girl in an ancient costume with a delicate appearance and a little baby fat on her face descended from the sky. She snatched the racket from an athlete's hand and pushed her away with her other hand. Then, with an excited look on her face, she hit the ping-pong ball that bounced off the table. After hitting 3 balls in a row, another strong bald man descended. He carried her and disappeared from the stands in a flash. The whole process took no more than 4 seconds. He had watched this short video hundreds of times. Chao Wenji's eyes were full of unwillingness. He had worked so hard, but she was still stronger than him. The difference was like heaven and earth. She was clearly younger than him. I will definitely be stronger than her. Chao Wenji clenched his fist and said to himself. After watching the video a few more times, Chao Wenji finally closed it. His eyes were filled with indifference and disdain as he swept a few glances at the clamorous discussion about cultivation methods are only in the hands of a few people. A group of incompetent losers who expect others to grant them fairness. Because of this, you will always be at the bottom of society, always looking up to the glory of others. Although he didn't pay much attention, he knew what the ultimate goal of these people was. They wanted the country to take out all the cultivation methods. Ridiculous, childish thinking, the wailing of a defeated dog. There was never equality in this world. In school, some people were short, some people were tall. Some people were ugly, some people were beautiful. Some people were rich, some people were ordinary. They were destined to be unequal from birth. In school, some people were good at studying, some people were bad at studying. Some people were good at language, some people were good at math. This was also unequal. It wasn't the gap brought about by studying. It was the innate gap between individuals. Therefore, the extravagant hope of equality was a laughable thing. Moreover, even if the country really took out the cultivation methods, did they think they would be the ones who benefited? Did they think they could achieve the same results just because they had the same cultivation methods? Ridiculous. The ones who benefited were those countries that had tried everything but couldn't get it. Now they were eyeing it covetously. Did those wailing people really not understand something that even he could understand? They just didn't want to believe that they were mediocre. They were just desperate for their own situation, but they couldn't afford to pay any price, so they used this childish method to give themselves a little more hope in life, or rather, an excuse. Chao Wenji finished the breakfast full of meat. According to the previous healthcare system, this kind of breakfast was definitely not good for the body. I'm going to school. Chao Wenji put the plate aside and wiped his mouth with a handkerchief. Wenji. The dignified middle-aged man on the other side of the table called out to him. This was his father, Chao Yuzhou, who was also a famous entrepreneur in the country. Someone must have invited you, right? Have you made up your mind? Chao Yuzhou asked indifferently. Before the Olympics, there was a very important event. The National Youth Virtual Fighting Competition. It was carried out through one of New Century's most famous virtual games, Theon. This was a game that could constantly measure the user's personal strength and condition. The virtual fighting competition had been held for more than 15 years and was now one of the most famous competitions in the world. He, on the other hand, was ranked third in the Chinese under-15 tournament. In other words, he was ranked third among all the 15-year-old boys and girls in the country. It was a result that was worthy of pride. However, Chao Wenji's face turned gloomy when he thought of that match. The top three were all within his expectations. However, he had lost to someone he shouldn't have lost to. That weak and incompetent last-place student since he was young. Chao Wenji felt a burst of anger whenever he thought of that timid face. That guy was so strong and he lost to him. He couldn't accept it. Despite his gloominess, Chao Wenji didn't forget to answer his father's question. The best is not here yet. After saying that, he turned around and left. The people from the Armed Forces Command aren't here yet? Chao Yuzhou understood. With Wenji's strength, the Armed Forces Command was the most suitable for him. Although the military was not bad, there was still a gap between them and the Armed Forces Command in terms of high-end strength and techniques. When he arrived at school, Chao Wenji ignored the many students who were staring at him. He was already used to this kind of gaze. He came from a wealthy family, had great talent, and was good-looking. It could be said that he was one of the most admired people in this private school. It should be noted that although the students in this private school came from good families, there were still different levels of wealth. Coupled with the last two factors, the gap was even wider. It was just that he was always cold and unapproachable. In contrast, there was another person who was much more approachable. Hey, the third most powerful student in the world is here. A young man greeted him with a smile. Chao Wenji stopped in his tracks and looked over coldly. Rin Xia, are you mocking me? How can that be? I can't be more envious. This is the third most powerful student in the world. If I had such strength, my father would be satisfied. Rin Xia said with a grin. Another high-profile student in this school was Rin Xia. His father was Ren Wanyan, one of the richest people in the country and in the world. Get lost. Chao Wenji's face darkened. Ren Xia had always been low-key, but he wasn't much weaker than Ren Xia. However, Ren Xia hated him very much, and he had just dropped to the second most hated person in the list. What she hated the most was that he always did everything skillfully and easily, and that he could get along with anyone. He always made Ren Xia feel that he was a hypocrite. You are still so irritable. I should call you Exploding Chao instead. Ren Xia laughed nonchalantly. Chao Wenji gritted his teeth and asked, Do you want to fight now? Forget it, I am no match for you. Ren Xia smiled and took a few steps back. Chao Wenji entered the school building with a cold face and met the yes man he hated the most in the corridor. It was Xiang Yang. Upon seeing Ren Xia, Xiang Yang quickly stepped aside. Chao Wenji stopped in front of him, turned his head, and looked at him coldly. I didn't expect you to hide so well. No, I just... Xiang Yang's face changed. He wanted to explain, but he was a little hesitant and his words were a little unclear. Don't make that disgusting look. Chao Wenji looked at him with disgust and walked away coldly. During the morning classes, Chao Wenji was called to the principal's office. This is Chao Wenji, whom you are looking for. The principal smiled and said to the two sitting on the sofa, You can talk. Then he left the room, leaving the three of them in the room. Both of them were in their 30s and looked very capable. When they looked at Chao Wenji, there was undisguised admiration in their eyes. We watched your match. It was very exciting, which is rare for someone your age. Don't you know how to introduce yourselves? Chao Wenji said coldly. What a hot-tempered little guy. One of them said, We are from the Armed Forces Command. We want to invite you to join the Armed Forces Command after graduation. This is our intention. The Armed Forces Command has a high school directly under it, which will provide the best education. Of course, there is also the best martial arts. I don't need to say more. Joining the Armed Forces Command is the best for your future. The coldness in Chao Wenji's eyes faded a little. The other party was right. They were the ones he had been waiting for. It was said that in order to balance some departments, the Armed Forces Command was the last to send an invitation when inviting seedlings of suitable age. If he refused other invitations and didn't get an invitation from the Armed Forces Command, he would have to wait for another year. Therefore, apart from those who had absolute confidence like him, many people would choose to accept an invitation first. For example, the military or other functional departments. Your classmate has agreed to our invitation. It is said that you two have known each other since you were young. I think it will be easy for you to blend in when you arrive in Wuji City, the other person said with a smile. Chao Wenji, who had been feeling a little relaxed, suddenly narrowed his eyes. His expression also turned ugly. Xiang Yang, you know each other since kindergarten, right? The person who spoke still didn't understand why his expression was a little off. Then I refuse. Chao Wenji said coldly and turned to leave. When he turned around, his eyes were full of anger. They actually invited that damn guy first before inviting him? Which guy was more important in their eyes? Baidu search 881 Chinese network yen. No advertising words. Chapter 1024. Chao Wenji clenched his fists tightly with one hand and closed the door with the other, shutting out the series of "Why? You've been waiting for us all this time? And you'd better think about it again. I will enter the military. Even in the military, there are enough cultivation techniques. I will definitely surpass that damned guy. Of course, there are others." Chao Wenji said in a low voice with anger in his heart. There seemed to be flames burning in his eyes. Chao Wenji returned to the classroom in silence. No one knew that he had rejected the Armed Forces Command, which no one could refuse. No one knew what kind of future he was thinking about. But at night after school, he was stopped again. "There's something I need to discuss with you." Ren Xia appeared in front of him and extended an invitation. There was no longer a fixed smile on his face. There was a trace of sincerity in his eyes. Because of this, Chao Wenji did not get angry and followed him to the rooftop without saying a word. Although Chao Wenji disliked him, the other party was a genius with the same talent as him. After the other party removed that smile and pretentiousness, Chao Wenji also wanted to hear what he had to say. "Tell me, what's the matter?" Chao Wenji asked when they reached the rooftop. "I'm here to invite you on behalf of someone else," Ren Xia said seriously. "My uncle." Chao Wenji's eyes were filled with doubt when he suddenly recalled a rumor he had heard recently. He knew that it was not a rumor. Dayo Martial Arts School? Chao Wenji thought of the young girl and the bald man in the video. "Not bad." Ren Xia smiled. "My uncle praised you and said you're not bad." Then, he said enviously, "Even my uncle has never praised me like this." After saying that, he spread his hands and said, "Well, actually, I rarely see my uncle." "Who is that girl?" What Ren Xia wanted to ask was not this, but how old the girl was and how strong she was. "My cousin? You don't have to think about it anymore. That's a true genius. She was born with Earth-rank strength." Speaking of her cousin, Ren Xia was really envious. Other people's lifelong pursuits, she had them all the moment she was born. Wealth, power, status, strength, beauty, she had no shortcomings. If there was any shortcoming, it was probably that his brain wasn't that good. Ahem, it's not good to think that way. However, although his cousin was very smart at times, most of the time she was extremely childish. So childish that it was scary. Perhaps this was the price. When Ren Xia thought of this, she felt much better. Everyone knows that the Armed Forces Command is the department with the most martial arts manuals and the most complete training of talents. Ren Xia's tone changed. In fact, the Dayo Martial Arts School is the department. Most people knew that the Dayo Martial Arts Center was very powerful, but they didn't know how powerful it was. If you accept the invitation, You will have the opportunity to see those who are truly powerful. Chao Wenji opened his mouth and said, 5 years before the nation announced the martial arts manuals, the Daeyo Martial Arts Club had already appeared. Furthermore, there were Xian-level experts in it. Of course, this was only speculation based on the video at that time. In fact, Daeyo Martial Arts School already had an Earth-class expert at that time. After so many years, with the improvement of the strength of the people, the popularity of Daeyo martial arts centers was no longer the same as it was in the past. However, this was only in the eyes of ordinary people. In fact, the best bodyguards in the world still came from Daeyo's dojo. It was said that the disciples of the dojo could go back to study after being bodyguards for 5 years. Some people wanted to hire those disciples from the dojo at a high price, but they were all rejected. Rinxia smiled. Just like what Chao Wenji said, ordinary people didn't know about this, but it wasn't a secret among the rich and powerful. So, what's your answer? What kind of treatment will I receive if I go? Chao Wenji asked after remaining silent for a while. The disciples of Daeyo Martial Arts Club were divided into many levels. The lowest level was naturally the outer disciples, who could learn by paying tuition fees. As for the next level, they would be inner court disciples. These disciples were promoted from the outer disciples. Any higher level was the core disciple. In the past, Daeyo Martial Arts Club would find talented seedlings from outside and directly recruit them as inner disciples or even core disciples. However, in recent years, there were fewer and fewer people who were directly recruited as inner disciples, not to mention core disciples. Above them, there seemed to be another level. It was said that in Daeyo Martial Arts Club, core disciples were the real disciples. Chao Wenji wanted to know what level of disciple he would be after he went in. Inner disciple. Ren Xia understood what he was thinking. Although uncle praised you, you can only be an inner disciple at the moment. However, with your strength, it is only a matter of time before you become a core disciple. As for higher levels, it will depend on your merits. Merits? Chao Wenji repeated softly. Seeing that Rinxia had no intention of explaining, he didn't ask further. Although you will be an inner disciple, I can say that you won't regret it. Rinxia said. Chao Wenji was silent for a while. Being an inner disciple didn't satisfy him, but it wasn't unacceptable. I want to meet the master of Daeyo Martial Arts Club and ask him a few questions. If possible, I will accept it, Chao Wenji said after thinking for a while. Daeyo Martial Arts Club was more suitable for him than the military. The reason why he didn't consider it before was that the military had invited him and he would be valued more if he went. Secondly, Daeyo Martial Arts Club had many branches. If he went, he would only become an outer disciple of one of the branches. He wasn't sure when he would become an inner disciple or a higher level disciple. If he was delayed for a few years, he would fall behind others, which he couldn't accept. Now that Rinxia had issued an invitation on behalf of Daeyo Martial Arts Club, this was an opportunity. I will help you ask, but I don't know if my uncle will agree. Rinxia smiled bitterly. I can't make the decision on this matter. Rinxia smiled bitterly. In fact, he didn't only praise Chao Wenji, but also the group of young experts who were in the top 10. Furthermore, the invitation from Daeyo Martial Arts School wasn't from Rinbaqian. It was Ding Jie's idea. Of course, Rinxia couldn't tell him about this. That night, after he received the call, he agreed without hesitation. In fact, Daeyo Martial Arts Club had been restricted in its recruitment. Otherwise, Ding Jie would have caught all of those young geniuses in one fell swoop. However, this was China after all, and the club couldn't go too far. You snatched away those budding talents and let the country accept those who were left behind? Once or twice was fine, but if this went on, how could the country endure it? Furthermore, he was very interested in the young people on Earth. He had to admit that although Earth didn't have the unique environment of that world, there were many geniuses on Earth. Earth had a population of more than 6 billion people. China alone had a population of 1.2 billion, which was 3 times that of the total human population in that world. A huge population base, advanced technology, a good life, and a large amount of knowledge that everyone could master allowed Earth to produce a large number of geniuses. For example, he watched videos of competitions when he was bored. Some of the young practitioners who could reach the man-wheel level at the age of 15 or 16 could even reach the earth-wheel level in that world. Although he couldn't bring them to that world, they would still become his strength in this world. Therefore, he didn't mind taking some time out to meet this genius that his nephew highly admired. P.S. This is from a friend, Fate chat group. Fate, who doesn't have a living characteristic in this world, has formed a chat group. Everyone in the group is Fate, has nice words, and knows how to contribute selflessly. I love it here. The quality of the top authors is guaranteed. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second, Booksellers Mobile. Chapter 1025. Chao Wenji looked up at the towering building and felt a little nervous, which was rare. Given his family background, he had seen many big shots. However, this person was completely different from those big shots he had seen before. He was surrounded by the brightly lit Wuji city. The current Wuji city was no longer as deserted as it used to be. The 5 million permanent residents were the reason why the threshold for entering Wuji city had been raised. Every 3 minutes, there would be an aircraft flying across the sky. Thanks to the great power of the Armed Forces Command, this city, which was filled with geniuses and experts from all over the country, was not chaotic. Although there were many disputes, they were all under certain rules. In terms of public security, it was much better than in most cities nowadays. Of course, these were not issues that he cared about. This was the most prosperous area in Wuji City, surrounded by all kinds of high-end hotels, shopping malls, hospitals, and restaurants. In the middle of all these was the headquarters of the Daeyo Martial Arts Centers. The building was called Deep Pool in Wuji City. Or rather, Dragon Pool. Dragon Pool and Tiger Denver. Everyone in Wuji City knew how terrifying the Daeyo Martial Arts Centers were. After all, there were many Earth-class experts exuding a terrifying aura coming in and out of the building every day. For example, there were 3 burly men wearing baggy pants and singlets walking out of the building now. Their exposed limbs were covered with horrible scars, and they exuded a terrifying aura like that of a ferocious beast from head to toe. He had seen Earth-class experts before, but the pressure he felt from them was far less than that of the 3 men in front of him. They were like ferocious beasts that chose to devour people. Just one look at them would send chills down one's spine. Ren Xia, who was beside him, took a step forward and cupped his hands respectfully. Teacher Shigu, Teacher Shan Kuei, Teacher Tai Shu. Hey, it's the little guy from the boss's family. The 3 men glanced at him and laughed. Let's go drink. Without waiting for him to say anything, they picked him up and walked out. Ren Xia was scared out of his wits. How would he dare to drink with them? If he drank with others, he would be drinking with them. They were a group of ruthless people who could beat the drums and pass flowers with grenades. He said, I still have something to discuss with Uncle. Uncle is waiting for me upstairs. Oh, the lady boss wants to see you. The burly man who was grabbing him sounded regretful. Recently, your father hasn't come to drink with us. Ren Xia cursed in her heart. Wasn't it because I drank with you last time and ended up in the hospital? Where did that Ding Jie kid go? Last time, he went to the hospital with his father and stayed for 2 more days. After he was discharged, he ran away in a hurry. I think he went to look for Auntie Ning. I heard that Uncle Ding Jie has been chasing after Auntie Ning for more than 10 years? Ren Xia pondered. When the other party placed him on the ground, he quickly took a few steps back. I'm going to pay my respects to Big Uncle now. Next time, I'll bring gifts to meet the teachers. Go, go. The 3 big men smiled and waved their hands. They put their arms around each other's shoulders and got into a car that had been waiting for a long time by the roadside. Only then did Ren Xia heave a sigh of relief. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and looked like he had just survived a disaster. Are you afraid of them? Ren Xia said calmly. In his heart, he felt that this was normal. Even if such a terrifying person stood in front of them, they would feel pressured. I'm not afraid, I'm afraid of drinking with them. Ren Xia corrected. You'll know when there's a chance in the future. After thinking about it, he still warned this classmate. Although Big Uncle has already strictly ordered them not to drink with students, there's always a chance. I mean, if they ask you to drink with them, don't go. Chao Wenji turned his head to look at Renxia's especially serious face. Although he did not understand, he accepted his good intentions. I understand. Remember. All right, let's go up. For they. Nominally, they're the instructors of the dojo, but they really don't have any talent in teaching. Of course, their strength is unquestionable. It can be said that they're terrifying. Even if they're all earth-rank martial artists, they can fight 1 against 2, or even 3. Then the lady bosses. Chao Wenji felt a little strange. From what they said, it seemed that they were referring to Renxia's uncle. Just as you guessed, it's my uncle. Renxia smiled. Although he himself did not understand the situation of his uncle's family, it was really a very funny thing for such a fierce uncle to be called the lady boss. In his heart, his uncle was very mysterious. He was very indifferent to everything and always gave him a feeling that he was a bystander, looking at everything in the world with cold eyes. However, his uncle seemed to be a henpecked man. Cough cough. This matter could not be said. They took the elevator to the 6th floor, which was the Dayo dojo. Dozens of students were doing various exercises at the side of the field. Of course, this was not all. In fact, the dojo occupied a total of 3 floors. There were many training fields of various sizes. This was just a place similar to the front desk. Even so, the muscles on Chao Wenji's face twitched slightly when he saw everything in the field. Among the dozens of people, most of them were people whose strength he could not see through. Among them, there were 2 people who had an undisguised terrifying aura. It should be said that there were 4 Earth-rank martial artists. Other than the 2 Earth-rank martial artists in the field, there were 2 other men who had the same terrifying aura as the 3 people he met before standing in front of another elevator. Teachers Xiong, I have an appointment with my uncle. Renxia brought Chao Wenji to greet the 2 before entering the elevator. What are they doing? Chao Wenji's heart trembled a little. Those were Earth-rank martial artists. Were they watching the elevator? Were they like security guards or doormen guarding the elevator? Just like what you see. Renxia understood his feelings very well. An Earth-rank martial artist who was admired by countless people and received courteous treatment from the Armed Forces Command and the military as a doorman was probably the only place where such a sensational thing could happen. Chao Wenji felt as if his heart had been hit by a sledgehammer. Don't think too much. The situation here is a little special. Renxia was afraid that he would be shocked and have the idea that he was trying his best to reach Earth rank just to be a doorman, so she kindly explained. I know. Chao Wenji took a deep breath. He did not want to show his wavering emotions in front of this schoolmate. Furthermore, it was very difficult for him to accept being comforted by others, even if the other party had good intentions. However, from the moment he entered the door until now, he had already discovered a lot of things. It was completely different from what he had imagined in the past, and the strength of the other party had far exceeded his expectations. He began to subconsciously guess what kind of person he was about to meet. There were too few records about him in the outside world. It was as if a hand had erased everything about him. More than half of his experiences were blank. What could be found now were things that happened before he was 25 years old, as well as a few arrest warrants. One was a domestic arrest warrant for the destruction of a family involved in the underworld in S-City 30 years ago. The other was an arrest warrant issued by the US more than 20 years ago. Other than that, it was all blank. This was a very mysterious person. From the 2 arrest warrants and the brief glimpse in the video, he should be a very vicious person. The elevator went straight to the top floor. After the elevator door opened, there was a huge living room. 2 people were sitting on the sofa talking. From their angle, they could see a man in a bathrobe, bald, and without eyebrows. He looked to be around 30 years old, but according to the information, he should be 56 years old. His figure was very strong, similar to the few people they had seen earlier. However, he gave off a different feeling. He didn't feel like he was facing a ferocious beast. Instead, he had the imposing manner of a superior. In addition to these 2 people, There was a young girl walking on the back of the sofa with her arms spread out as if she was walking on a tightrope. When he saw her, Chao Wenji's pupils shrank. It was the young girl in the video. Before he came, he heard from Ren Xia that she was 9 years old. However, it didn't matter how old she was since she was born with the strength of an Earth-level expert. "Uncle! Yu Qing!" Ren Xia greeted first, took a few steps forward, and smiled. "Aunt Ning is actually here." Ren Xia also saw the side profile of the person who turned around. She was one of the most famous actresses in the country, Ning Kaichen. She had excellent looks, outstanding acting skills, a deep background, and no scandals. Why was she here? According to Ren Xia, she seemed to be very familiar with him. He looked at the two of them and smiled. "You are here. Have a seat." First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second, Booksellers Mobile. Chapter 1026. Every time someone calls me auntie, my heart. Ning Kaichen covered her mouth and chuckled. It felt weird to call herself auntie, but she usually only addressed herself this way in front of Rinpoche. Auntie Ning is still young, but seniority can't be influenced by age. Otherwise, it will be a mismatch, Ren Xia said honestly. Others only knew that Ning Kaichen was a famous movie star. If she hadn't slacked off, she would have achieved more than what she had today. However, not many people knew that she also had a superb swordsmanship that made people gasp in amazement. Your words always attract people's attention. Ning Kaichen chuckled and said to Rinpoche, "I'll take my leave first." "Go ahead," Rinpoche said faintly. Ning Kaichen had done better than he had expected on Earth over the years. More than 400 scholars had been sent back to Dayo, and it was difficult to expand for the time being. After all, with so many scholars over the years, there were already people eyeing them. Apart from that, her secondary job was unexpected. She actually became the top female star in the country. Moreover, she liked the feeling of being the center of attention and never got tired of it over the years. On the contrary, money wasn't in her consideration. "Little princess, I'll bring you a gift next time," Ning Kaichen said to Hua, who had jumped from the back of the sofa to the cabinet. "Okay." Hua nodded in agreement with a gleam in her eyes. She loved gifts the most. "Let's go, little fellow." Ning Kaichen patted Ren Xia's shoulder and swayed away. Hua, stop fooling around." Rinpoche clapped his hands. Hua had never stopped being restless and couldn't stay still. A 3-year-old child with an overabundance of energy made it impossible for anyone to criticize him. When Rinpoche was at this age, he also broke the windows of his neighbor's house, threw dead rats in front of his neighbor's house, and even stole the old hen that laid eggs when he went to watch TV in winter. Therefore, according to Rinpoche's parents, this was inherited. "Oh!" Hua responded and appeared on Ren Xia's neck in a flash. She put her legs on his shoulders, held his head with her 2 small hands, and asked excitedly, "Is there a gift?" "Yes, how could I forget my cousin's gift?" Ren Xia quickly replied. Hua. Rinpoche frowned. Although she was only 3 years old, she didn't have any etiquette at all. When she returned, she would be given lessons on royal etiquette. "It's okay. Cousin is still young. It's the time for her to play." Ren Xia smiled. Although he was only 9 years old, 9 years old wasn't that young. Normal children wouldn't be like this when they were 9 years old. As a successor, he should be much stronger than his peers at this age. But his cousin's sister was the complete opposite. She was much worse than ordinary children. "I heard that she hasn't even gone to school yet." Big Uncle's education of her is really worrying. Was there really nothing wrong with his cousin's brain? Chao Wenji was also thinking in his mind. This girl had just appeared on Ren Xia's shoulder, and he had not even noticed how she had appeared. What a powerful strength. But this girl was a little strange, so childish. Also, the name, 2 Flowers, it's so old-fashioned. It's hard to believe that someone would give their daughter such a name in this day and age. How much hatred does he have? Rinpoche sized up the young man sitting in front of him. He was 15 years old and was already at the man-will level. He was quite talented and had good combat instincts. He was born into a good family, and according to the information, he worked hard. Apart from having an awkward personality, this was only a small problem. Renbaqian had seen many experts with more awkward personalities than him. At the very least, there weren't many people in the Aboriginals' imperial court who were considered normal by Earthlings. Lin Qiala and Lin Yu. Which one of them was normal? Lin Dong was even the leader of a cult. As for Ning Kaichen, she was also a big shot in the masochistic world. To him, this kind of chunibu wasn't even considered child's play. I watched your competition and it was very good. At your age, very few people can be better than you, he praised. Although Tong Lan reached Kismet Heaven at the age of 8, Shurgan reached Kismet Heaven at the age of 10, and Hong Xian could break through to Cardinal Heaven at any time when she was in her 20s, the young man in front of him was still very immature compared to the geniuses of that world. However, as a leader, he didn't mind giving some encouragement to the young man at the appropriate time. Although I'm not the best yet, I will become the best. Chao Wenji blurted out the words in his heart. His mind flashed with the last place and the other person in this competition. I like young people with drive. Renbaqian laughed. I heard from Rin Xia that you have questions for me? He asked. Yes, there are some things that I can't find the answer to. Besides you, I don't think many people can answer them for me, Chao Wenji said. Well, I can answer 3 of your questions. He thought about it. Since Rin Xia was asking him questions, it should be related to training. He could give her a chance. Thank you, senior. 3 questions were a little too few, but he had a lot of questions to ask. However, he also knew that this opportunity was hard to come by. In this world, are there really god-tier martial artists? Chao Wenji thought about it and still asked a question that he wanted to know the answer to. Rin Xia was looking forward to his question, but she didn't expect it to be this. She sighed and thought, you should ask me this question. What a waste of an opportunity. Yes. He nodded. Although there weren't any on Earth, the Empress would often come to Earth. Chao Wenji clenched his fists when he heard his question. This answer made him understand one thing. There were indeed many things in this world that he couldn't come into contact with. For example, everyone knew that there was such a level, but he had never heard of a godly expert who actually existed. What about the rest? How many things were there that he didn't know? How many secrets were there in this world? Second question. I heard that there are original and improved versions of this technique. What's the difference? Rin Xia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You're asking me this question? Another opportunity wasted. The improved version is more suitable for most people. It requires less resources and can progress faster, he replied in a relaxed manner. Then he changed his tone and said, however, there are pros and cons to everything. Just like building a tall building with a good foundation, although the improved version has various advantages, it has a huge disadvantage. That is, the foundation is insufficient, and it's more difficult to advance. If the original cultivation difficulty is 5 to 7, then the improved cultivation difficulty is 7 to 9. Chao Wenji's heart skipped a beat. It turned out that this was the difference. Fortunately, he asked this question. Otherwise, he would never have known. In fact, he already knew about this. After all, this technique had been spread on Earth for more than 20 years, and some of its flaws had long been discovered. The original version had a higher requirement for talent, while the improved version was more suitable for the general public. Therefore, although there were some flaws, its superiority was unquestionable. After asking these 2 questions, Chao Wenji kept overturning the last question he wanted to ask. What level could one reach in cultivation? The answer to this question was too far away from him. Furthermore, the other party was only at the Earth level. Perhaps when he was as strong as the other party, he would naturally know a lot of things. How could he surpass everyone? He just had to be stronger than everyone else. How could he cultivate faster? There were no shortcuts to cultivation, and he could only work harder. Questions appeared in his mind, but he overturned them one by one. Finally, a thought that had been hidden deep in his heart floated to the surface. He had never told anyone about this, but he really wanted to explore the secret behind it and didn't know if the other party would know anything. If the other party knew, based on what he had seen, the other party wouldn't harm him, right? Where did these cultivation methods come from? asked Chao Wenji slowly. Rinpoche glanced at him and replied, I can answer this question, but do you really want to know? This is your last question. Chao Wenji hesitated for a moment before he gritted his teeth and said, Ever since I broke through to the black level, I always have a dream. I'm in the middle of a battlefield, surrounded by humans, and facing enemies that have 8 arms or are half human and half snake creatures. There are also people with lightning wrapped around their bodies, flames burning in the sky, and ravines left by battles on the ground. Although it's a dream, it's very real. Whether it's the pain or the blood splattering on my face, it's as if I'm experiencing it personally. Chao Wenji stared at his expression as he spoke. That dream always made him suspect that it was his previous life. Although it was too ridiculous to talk about his previous life in this scientific world, that dream was too real. But that dream was too real, and the emotions in the dream had always been entangled with him. Ever since he had this dream, he was often troubled by the emotions in the dream, such as sadness, anger, pity, and unwillingness. Therefore, he wanted to know the answer. Moreover, in the dream, humans were fighting against foreign races. Therefore, he wanted to bet on whether the person in front of him knew anything. If Rinpoche knew something as a fellow human, he shouldn't hurt him. Not only could he get the answer that had been bothering him for a long time, but there might also be other benefits. After listening to his narration, Rinpoche stared at him intently, and a storm was set off in his heart. The war between humans and foreign races? Chao Wenji looked at Rinpoche's expression and was shocked. Rinpoche actually knew about it. His dream wasn't entirely a dream. Ren Xia initially felt that it was strange that Chao Wenji actually brought up his dream and asked him about it. He really didn't seem like such an irrational person. However, Ren Xia's heart trembled when he saw their expressions. Rinpoche leaned against the sofa and changed his posture while still staring at Chao Wenji. Ren Xia, take Erhua to one side to play for a while. I think she can't sit still anymore. Ren Xia felt regretful. He wanted to continue listening, but since his uncle had spoken, he had no choice but to take Erhua to one side to play. It seemed like there was a huge secret behind this. Not only did he understand, but Chao Wenji also understood. After Ren Xia left, Rinpoche spoke again. Tell me everything about your dream. Recommending a book by an excellent author, The Almighty Richest Man Reborn. Rebirth meant that all the cards in one's hand were trump cards. After rebirth, Wei Mingrang not only wanted to let his family live a good life, but he also wanted to change the fate of countless people. First, he set a small goal, such as Bookseller's Mobile Edition. Chapter 1027. Uncle, we'll take our leave first, Ren Xia said to Rinpoche, thinking that she had finally escaped from her cousin's clutches. She couldn't beat her in a fight, and she still had the temperament of a child, which was really a headache. She looked at Chao Wenji, who was still frowning as if there was still something bothering him. Although Ren Xia was curious, she knew that this wasn't the time to inquire. After the two of them left, Rinpoche closed his eyes and calmed his fluctuating emotions. The 8-armed race with 8 arms, the serpent race that was half human and half snake, the thunder barbarian race that was surrounded by lightning. It was indeed that world. According to his description, the sky full of flames should be the scene that Rinpoche had seen. Although he didn't see everything, he later learned from the Empress and the others that he didn't see. He didn't expect that there were people on Earth who had memories of that world. Was this reincarnation? It was really unexpected. There was actually such a thing as reincarnation. Furthermore, people could actually be reincarnated on Earth. Rinpoche didn't know some of the things that she didn't say. Otherwise, he would have been more certain about this matter and would have gotten more information. Earth and that world are really strange. Rinpoche muttered to himself. He was born on Earth, but he was able to transmigrate to that world. There was another him in that world, even though his family background, and experiences were completely different. That world had the same language as Earth and some similar cultures. The people of that world reincarnated on Earth. There were also dragons and Kirins as well as Yinglong, who had turned into ashes. These two worlds seemed to have some kind of connection. There was also Hua. Rinpoche and the Empress's offspring were actually born at Kismet Heaven. which had never happened before. The Empress wasn't the only one who gave birth to children at Kismet Heaven. He didn't know if there was any connection between the two worlds. There were really a lot of unsolved mysteries. The connection between the two worlds had reached a point where he couldn't ignore it. It seemed like he had to pay more attention to whether there were people like Chao Wenji on Earth. He also had to go back and check on Chao Wenji's martial arts to find out the origin and inheritance of that martial arts. Perhaps he could find out something. The next day, another major event happened in China. Some rioters who intended to cause conflict during the Olympics were arrested. It was said that some people had an inexplicable hatred for the country and were controlled by some countries after gaining power. However, Rinpoche's heart didn't even ripple when he heard this. He already knew what the country was going to do. This group of rioters was only a small part of it. But his mind was not on this at the moment. He brought Little Flower back to Dayo. "Mother Empress." When Hua saw the Empress, he ran into her arms. It had been 7 days since she last saw the Queen Mother, and she missed it dearly. Acting like a mother, the Empress picked Rinpoche up and put her aside. "The screen is blocked." Looking at the TV series in the air, he asked faintly, "How was it? Did you get into trouble?" Honeysuckle looked aggrieved. "Queen Mother, did you say that I would only get beaten if I did something wrong?" The Empress finally turned her head to look at her. Then she looked at Rinpoche and asked, "What happened?" "I obviously didn't do anything wrong, but my father beat me up." Hua grabbed the Empress's arm and complained. "That's the Olympics." Rinpoche spread his hands. She ran into the Olympic stadium and knocked away the athletes, interrupting the competition. "It's just a boring sports competition." The Empress didn't think much of it. "It's indeed boring for you, but it's an important competition for the people of Earth. Also, Hua is too reckless." Rinpoche didn't need her to understand and just reiterated. "She needs to start royal etiquette lessons. She's only 3 years old." The Empress was the main culprit for indulging Hua. She always felt that she was too young, even though she was the one who beat her up the most. She can already learn some things at the age of 3. You and I both know that her intelligence level is far beyond that of a 3-year-old. It's just that she's been exposed to too little and has learned too little. Furthermore, she's the future Empress of Dayo and even the human race when they return to that world. There are many things that she needs to bear. Rinpoche and the Empress began to discuss Hua's education beyond physical movements. This premise was very important. Harmony, love, democracy, freedom, and avoidance of domestic violence. In the end, neither of them convinced the other. Hua, who was at a loss as she watched the two arguing, knew that her good days had come to an end. Royal etiquette and culture lessons had to be carried out. Also, the practice of controlling her strength had to be strengthened. As for the matter regarding Chao Wenji, he didn't mention it as it was useless to talk about it at the moment. He would talk about it when there were more discoveries in the future. The next day, Rinpoche arranged for someone to look up information on Chao Wenji's martial arts. Mountain-splitting force and strange black scroll were martial arts that he obtained after destroying a few sects in Tianjin Basin. The names weren't outstanding, but the martial arts of that period had this style of naming. Even if it had a simple name like Liu Haquan, Rinpoche wouldn't find it strange that one punch could cause the earth to crack. Rumor had it that one of the 5 human emperors had a movement technique called left and right horizontal jumping technique. It was considered one of the strongest movement techniques in the world. After making arrangements, Rinpoche continued to devote himself to the 4 modernizations of Dayo. After all, this puzzle couldn't be solved in a day. The construction couldn't be stopped for even a day. "Princess, please sit still. You have to maintain the bearing of a princess. Swaying your body from side to side is really detrimental to your bearing." At night, Hua sat in a hall surrounded by 4 female officials who were in their 30s or 40s. They were all glaring at her like tigers watching their prey. Hua looked at the crowd. At first, she thought it was a fun game, but after a few minutes, she felt as if there were ants crawling on her body and subconsciously twisted her body. "Princess, if you continue to do this, we can only give you a warning, punishment," one of them said. Not too far away from them was Exinch, who was sitting ramrod straight. She was reciting the contents of the palace's etiquette while mumbling something. Zhu Hua, who was also sitting at the side, couldn't help but say, "She's still so young. Are you all humane? You too. Don't speak, sit upright, and have a calm demeanor." The female official hit her with the wooden board in her hand. The wooden board was 2 feet long and half an inch wide. On one side, there was the word, "Warning," and on the other side, there was the word, "Warning." The wooden board wasn't big, but it was made of a type of heartwood. It weighed 5 kilograms, had an uneven surface, and was wrapped in a layer of strange metal. It was rather painful when hit on the body. Even an Earth-level expert would get a patch of red when hit on the body with the word, "Warning." And when hit on the body with the word, "Warning," it was several times more painful than the other side. "I'll hit you," Zhu Hua threatened. "This is an etiquette lesson arranged by Her Highness. If you dare to make noise again, I'll hit the soles of your feet next time." Chapter 1028. As soon as Zhu Hua got up from the bed, she stood there with disheveled hair and a sluggish look. She was venting her anger like a young girl who had been bullied. "Why do I have to learn etiquette when the princess is learning etiquette? I might as well learn mathematics." Zhu Hua grumbled indignantly. If the freshmen who had just come into contact with calculus heard this, they would definitely welcome it. "Come, let's throw ourselves into the world of mathematics and reach the pinnacle of life together." "I'm not doing it. I might as well fight in the arena." Zhu Hua rolled her eyes and felt that fighting in the arena was more suitable for her. This time, she was not going to do it no matter what Yagüe said. That night. "The sugarcane harvest has been pretty good these days. As a bonus, you can get 2 sugar canes a day," Ren Baqian said before she could speak. Zhu Hua's eyes lit up. Although the sugar cane had a layer of skin, it contained the purest sweetness that no other fruit could compare to. There was also a lot of water, and the most important thing was that it could fill one's stomach. Just thinking about it made her salivate. "Thank you, Your Highness. However, Head Attendant Xiong has told me many times that you don't listen to her instructions and don't follow etiquette. You have been in the academy for so many years, but your studies have always been at the bottom. Now that you have come to the palace to learn some etiquette, you can't control your temper. You don't want to stay in the academy for so many years and learn nothing besides learning how to read, right?" Ren Baqian said. In Dayo, Xiong, Shi, Tai, and Tong were all common surnames. Among them, Ren Baqian was most curious about the surname Tong. After all, pandas and polar bears weren't strong and were only slightly stronger than biting rabbits like baby asts. The ancients wouldn't use such weak creatures as their surnames or the names of their villages. After all, in the early days, surnames were usually based on the location of the village, the special minerals, and the beasts that were totem beasts. He reckoned that there were powerful beasts called bears in the outside world. Got it? Zhu Hua felt a headache when she heard Ren Baqian's lecture. "Go, I will get someone to send the sugar cane to you and Hua in a while." Ren Baqian waved his hand. "I will take my leave then." Ren Baqian grinned as he watched Zhu Hua leave. This child was really easy to fool. In fact, he already knew that Zhu Hua would not be patient enough to learn etiquette. It was inevitable that he would come over to complain or resign. Although Zhu Hua was fooled by him again, Zhu Hua's treatment was getting better and better. Now, he got pastries, sugar, and sugar cane every month. When he returned to the palace, he saw that the Empress was sitting there and seemed to be in a good mood. "Is there something good today?" Ren Baqian laughed. "You can say so." Hong Xian, that lass, has finally broken through, the Water Empress said with a smile. After all, because of Hong Wu, the Empress had been paying close attention to the Hong residents. Now that Hong Xian had broken through, she also felt happy. "It is indeed a good thing. Has your Majesty thought of a position for her?" Ren Baqian laughed. He had long since forgotten about the little conflict he had with Hong Xian. Furthermore, Hong Xian had reached the cardinal heaven level at the age of 29. She had great potential and might even reach Hong Wu's level in the future. If he could leave the 60,000 mountains, his achievements would be even greater. Great General means the Protectorate of the South, the Empress said. Oh, the General-in-Chief who supports the nation has spoken. I didn't expect it to be the Protectorate of the South. It won't be peaceful there. Not to mention the foreign races that are still being searched for, there are other dangers in the 60,000 mountains. Hong Xian's father is also under Shiwanya, right? The dangers are great, but there are also many opportunities. As long as the location of all the foreign races is confirmed and all of them are wiped out, the Protectorate of the South will be the outpost for the outside world. Ren Baqian nodded. Even if she wasn't among the first batch of people to go to the outside world, the Protectorate of the South would still be stationed near the outside world in the 60,000 mountains. It would definitely be better to train there than here. Although it was dangerous now, it was child's play compared to the war that would happen in the future. It was also an opportunity to hone her skills. Hongwu had put in a lot of effort. At her age, she should have gotten married long ago, right? Previously, she was focused on cultivation. Now that she has reached the cardinal heaven level and has reached a certain level, Your Majesty can appoint a marriage partner for her. Ren Baqian had never given up on increasing the Aboriginal population. This was especially true for such a talented young expert. He should get married earlier and have more offspring. Ren Baqian was already considering the Aboriginals' three-child subsidy policy to promote the increase in the population. The Empress rolled her eyes at him and said, "You are about to go berserk." Ren Baqian pondered and said, "Speaking of which, Your Majesty should set an example." The Empress lazily leaned against the couch, gave him a sideways glance, and said provocatively, "Come on." Immediately, the palace guards sealed the palace with ease. Before the two of them came out, no one could go in. The Empress didn't attend morning court for many days, and everyone in the imperial court was used to it. As a result, there was a small interlude. After finding out that the palace was sealed, Erhua rolled her eyes, knocked out her caretaker, Zhu Hua, with a brick and sneaked out. It was still the same restaurant as last time. Unfortunately, others knew her identity this time. They received her warmly and sent someone to inform the palace guards. Exenija personally came to take Erhua back, and she was greeted by Zhu Hua's resentful gaze. She was actually knocked out by a 3-year-old with a brick. Zhu Hua felt like dying. As for why a 3-year-old would use a brick to suffocate someone from behind, Zhu Hua could only sigh and say, "What a sin." This was what Exenja told her. Back then, she had suffocated a few people with stones in the village. Ren Baqian got people to keep an eye on Chao Wenji while he was busy with various things in Deyo. Chao Wenji was accepted as an inner disciple. He could only become a core disciple after reaching the later stages of the Manwheel level. At present, Deyo Martial Arts Center had trained dozens of Earthwheel experts, which was twice as many as the Armed Forces Command and the military combined. On one hand, it was because Deyo Martial Arts Center recruited many talented young people in the early stages. On the other hand, it was related to the martial arts manuals. As mentioned before, these original martial arts manuals had a much smaller target audience than the modified versions, and they also had a higher requirement for talent. However, the inner disciples in the Martial Arts Center were all talented young people, so there was naturally no need to worry about this. Shaojiang Academy. Ning Chongqing looked at the 20 young scholars in front of him. Among them, 17 were men and only 3 were women. Shaojiang Academy was considered open-minded, and there weren't many women in it. For example, Wangjing Academy didn't accept female disciples at all. In the Aboriginals, due to the strength of women, women were truly equal. Many of the court officials were women, especially in the Ministry of Revenue, where there were more women than men. However, in the Yun Nation, men were still the majority. Compared to the academy, women who were talented were more valued in the sections. This time, when you go to Black Bamboo Academy, you will be representing the academy and your own future. I won't say anything unnecessary. Whether it's for the academy or for yourselves, do your best. He didn't say what they would do their best, but everyone was clear about it. Understood. Don't worry, Dean. Well, remember not to talk nonsense when you get there. Although I know that all of you know what to do, I still have to remind you. No matter when, no matter what others say or do, remember your own identity, Ning Chongqing exhorted everyone. Go back and pack your bags. We will set off tomorrow. Set a small goal first, such as 1 second. Remember, Scholar House. Chapter 1029. There were 20 students in the Shaojiang Academy, and they were generally between 20 and 25 years old. In this era, there was no 9-year compulsory education. After attending the so-called primary school in the private school, one could only enter the academy after their ability and knowledge reached a certain standard. The standard was to enter the academy at the age of 15. Of course, there were also many students in their 30s who were still in primary school. This was mainly because even though one could enter the private school at the age of 8, not everyone could enter at this age. It was normal for one to enter the private school before the age of 20. The students heading to Lan City this time were the best in the academy, and their age was considered the most normal. This was because, in addition to the private school, many scholars would choose to travel during this period to increase their knowledge. Reading thousands of books and traveling thousands of miles wasn't just a saying. Dean, where are we going? It doesn't seem to be the way to Lan City. A student who always squinted his eyes asked Ning Chongqing during a break. In the distance, many students were paying attention to this place. You lost a bet? Ning Chongqing glanced at him and said faintly, So, you are here to inquire about the route? No, I won. The young man squinted his eyes and smiled. Dean, you said that if you are more capable than others, you must be more responsible than others. So, I took the initiative to take on this responsibility. You. Ning Chongqing was somewhat speechless. How could these words be used here? The young man in front of him was called Chao Gue, and he was one of the most outstanding students in the academy. Previously, he had traveled the entire Yun nation alone with a sword and left behind quite a reputation that was still being passed down to this day. If he had any shortcoming, it would be that he always liked to bet with others. Then, guess where we are going? Ning Chongqing said while stroking his beard. There was a questioning look in his eyes. We are going to meet up with the Salt Academy, and then head to Pingdu. Chao Gue answered without thinking. Tell me the reason. Our academy and the Salt Academy have always had a good relationship. This time, we are traveling together and can communicate with each other. We can also prepare for the confrontation with the other academies. This should be the case, regardless of the relationship between our two academies or the position of our academies. However, if we want to meet up and head to Lan City, we should meet up in Yujiang City. Our current route isn't to Yujiang City. Looking at the current route, we are going to Salt City, which was not far from the Salt Academy. Will they be waiting for us there? Since they were going to rendezvous in Salt City, they definitely wouldn't follow the normal route to Lan City. In that case, he could only head to Pingdu, where a large number of tractors and trucks could reach Lan City directly. However, Yujiang City was located on the route from Pingdu to Lan City, so it would save them a lot of time. There must be another reason why we are going to Pingdu, Chao Gue said with a smile. Continue. Ning Chongqing listened to his analysis. Although he was somewhat gratified in his heart, for it was a happy thing to have such a student in the academy. However, that hobby of his would cause him to suffer a great loss sooner or later. I can easily come up with many reasons to go to Ping City. The first was to meet up with the other academies and head to Lan City together. However, the dean hadn't mentioned it until now, so this was probably not the reason. Besides, Lan City wouldn't want us to have a heated exchange in Pingdu. The most exciting part should be left in front of everyone. The second reason is to head to the Protectorate office, where someone will escort us to Lan City. As far as I know, the road from Pingdu to Lan City is very safe. The security in Lan City is also much better than before, so it shouldn't be so troublesome. The third reason is that the dean is afraid that students like us have unrealistic thoughts, so he will bring us to Pingdu first to see how the people of Pingdu live and work in peace under the Protectorate office's rule. This will prevent us from causing trouble for the academy after we reach Lan City. The fourth reason. Ning Chongqing listened to Chao Gui's eloquent analysis without changing his expression. Chao Gui didn't know whether he had guessed correctly or not. I've already stated the 6 most probable possibilities, so can the dean dispel our doubts? Chao Gui paused after stating 6 possibilities in a row and changed the subject. Which one do you think it is? Ning Chongqing continued to test him. I don't think it's any of them. Ning Chongqing was slightly stunned. Since it wasn't any of them, why did he come up with 6 possibilities? My intuition tells me that it's none of them. Chao Gui knocked on his head. As a person who likes to bet, my intuition has always been very sharp. You will know when we get there. You can continue guessing along the way. Ning Chongqing suddenly smiled at him childishly. Thank you, Di. Chao Gui cupped his fists at Ning Chongqing. Ning Chongqing was slightly stunned. Chao Gui gave up so easily? I bet with them, and the dean won't tell me. Chao Gui laughed heartily and turned to wave at the people behind him. Boo! Everyone booed. You brat! Ning Chongqing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had actually become Chao Gui's gambling tool. However, I am really curious about the reason behind it. Let's wait and see. Chao Gui bowed at Ning Chongqing before swaggering off. One day later, everyone from the Shaojiang Academy met up with the Salt Academy. Dean Yan Shu, long time no see. Ning Chongqing greeted the dean of the Shaojiang Academy. The students from the 2 academies also greeted each other. I, Yan Ruosui, greet the brothers of the Shaojiang Academy. These are my classmates. A rather enthusiastic young man, or rather a teenager, greeted them and introduced them to the people from the Shaojiang Academy. Greetings. Everyone from the Shaojiang Academy cupped their fists. Their attitude wasn't perfunctory, but it wasn't very enthusiastic either. The reason was naturally because of what was mentioned above. It is my honor to be able to go to Lan City with everyone from the Shaojiang Academy this time. I might have to disturb you and listen to your wise opinions. Yen Ruosui didn't care about the other party's performance and was still extremely enthusiastic. Brother Ma, let's make a bet. Let's guess whether he can't wait to trample on us under his enthusiasm. At the back of the crowd, Chao Gui patted the shoulder of an ugly young man with small eyes and a face full of pimples. He whispered in his ear. If 2 people guess the same option, the bet won't work. The ugly young man's eyes flashed as he snorted. The Salt Academy was also a rather famous academy in the Yun Nation, and its style was similar to the Shaojiang Academy. The founder of the Salt Academy had learned from the Shaojiang Academy, so its style was also instilled into the Salt Academy. Coupled with other relationships, the relationship between the 2 academies was pretty good. However, this didn't mean that the students of the 2 academies would have a good relationship. The Salt Academy could be said to be a substitute for the Shaojiang Academy. For many people, regardless of whether they were students or other people, their primary goal was naturally the Shaojiang Academy, and the Salt Academy was the next best. Therefore, many students of the Salt Academy always felt that they were inferior to the Shaojiang Academy. On the surface, the Salt Dao Academy blindly followed the Shaojiang Academy's lead, but what the numerous students thought in their hearts was another matter. At the very least, there was definitely a desire to compare. That's hard to say. Chao Gui had a faint smile on his face. Why don't you guess? What's the bet? Ma Hualong asked. A drink at House Yunyan. Ping City's House Yunyan. Lan City's House Yunyan. Then it would be impolite to refuse. He must have other plans in mind. As long as he finds an opportunity, he will step on our heads to show others. I heard that the Salt Academy has a genius surnamed Yen. It should be him, right? Remember, a drink at House Yunyan. Ma Hualong giggled. Chao Gui chuckled. Then I'll guess another possibility. After saying that, he took 3 steps forward. Brother Yen, how have you been recently? Brother Chao, I saw you just now. Seeing that you didn't have any reaction, I thought that you had forgotten about me. Yen Ruosui welcomed him with joy. I was thinking of finding an opportunity to talk to you in detail later. If it wasn't for you, I would have been in danger. I still have to thank you for saving me. You're welcome. I encountered such a thing while traveling, so I naturally couldn't sit idly by. Chao Gui turned his head and smiled at Ma Hualong, causing the latter's face to darken. He had fallen into his trap. The two of them actually knew each other. And from the looks of it, Chao Gui had even saved him before. First, set a small goal, for example, 1 second. Chapter 1030. After meeting up with the Salt Academy, it took them 3 days to reach Pingdu. The Salt Academy had fewer people than the Shaojiang Academy with only 10 people. After all, they weren't the main characters this time. The strength of the students from the Salt Academy wasn't comparable to that of the 5 academies, and sending too many students would lower the average level of the students. Along the way, Ma Hualong observed the people from the Salt Academy, especially Yen Ruosu. He wanted to find out what was hidden behind his smile. But to his disappointment, Chao Gui didn't give himself away at all. Not only him, but even the students of the Salt Road Academy admired Chao Gui quite a bit. Even the other students from the Shaojiang Academy received a lot of benefits from this admiration. If it was only one person, it could be explained, but if all 10 of them were like this? Ma Hualong didn't believe it in any case. However, there was still a long way to go to Lan City. Once there, he would be able to find out what the other party was thinking. The other party could pretend for a while, but sooner or later, he would reveal himself. Pingdu wasn't considered an important city on the map of the Yun nation. It wasn't a strategic location, nor was it a place where trade routes converged, nor was it a flourishing place. However, after the Yun nation was destroyed, Pingdu became one of the most important cities. The Protectorate of the Northeast, which was now renamed the Protectorate of the Yun nation. The Yun nation was actually the name of the country, not the region. Surprisingly, after the Yun nation was destroyed, Dayo actually named this place the Yun nation. This was beyond many people's expectations. Just like when the Qin Empire destroyed the 6 states, if the regions were divided into Zhao, Qi, and Chu regions, it would constantly remind everyone that they were a group of people who had lost their countries. And I'm the winner. In fact, only a few people knew that he wanted to change the name of this place. However, when this idea was brought to the Empress, she simply said, "The Yun nation sounds good to me. The name Yun Yun sounds familiar, so let's just call it Yun Yun." As for what they think, when the Yun nation was still around, they couldn't do anything to my army. Now that the Yun nation has fallen, what can they do? I want to remind them that under the edge of my blade, they must know their place and behave themselves. If they can't do it, I will make them do it. He had been distressed about this for a long time. The Empress always liked to decide many things according to her own preferences. For example, beheading the envoy of another country. The Empress had done this more than once. Being an envoy in Dayo meant risking one's life. Up until now, it seemed that no one had been able to end well. The envoy of Great Xia, who had lived the longest, was beheaded after he refused to surrender. This explained why the Yun nation was still called the Yun nation. Pingdu had not been important in the past, but it was now the hub of the Yun nation. It was also the end of the road from Lan City to the Yun nation. How about a bet? Guess which academy we'll meet first here. Chao Gui nudged the red-lipped, white-toothed young man with his shoulder. "I never gamble, and I won't gamble with you," the young man said with a cold face. "How boring would that be?" "It's good to have a little excitement in life," Chao Gui said with a smile. "Not interested." The young man quickened his pace and ignored him. The young man was one of the 3 most outstanding disciples of the Shaojiang Academy, Shui Yuanpei. Shui Yuanpei, Ma Hualong, and Chao Gui each had their own characteristics. Ma Hualong was ugly, Chao Gui was a gambler, and Shui Yuanpei was old-fashioned, stubborn, had no hobbies, didn't like women, didn't like men, didn't amass wealth, and wasn't greedy for power. He was a boring person that no one could find any flaws in. However, he was also the Academy's most handsome student. "Hualong, forget it. You still owe me a banquet at House Union." Chao Gui looked at Ma Hualong and shook his head. "We still don't know who will win," Ma Hualong said. Chao Gui flashed to the back of the group, put his arm around Yen Ruosui's shoulder, and asked, "Do you want to make a bet?" Yen Ruosui laughed and said, "Brother, you still like to bet with people." He still remembered that when he faced those villains, he felt that he was going to die this time. However, the trembling girl behind him made him grit his teeth and stand in front of her. Do you want to make a bet? He hadn't reacted when that voice sounded. Let's bet what poison you were poisoned with just now. Look at the 3 bottles in my hand. One of them is the antidote, and the other 2 are poisons that will take effect immediately. Do you want to bet? I sprinkled the poison into the wind just now. Didn't you smell the cloying fragrance of the girls in Drunken Fragrance? This poison isn't that powerful. At most, it will make your intestines rot and you'll have to dig out your own eyes. You probably still have, let me calculate, about 5 minutes left. Of course, you can also bet that I'm lying to you. Which one do you want to bet on? Chao Gue sat on the eaves, fanning himself with one hand and holding a jar of wine in the other. There was a red lipstick mark left by some girl on his face, and he laughed wantonly at the crowd below. Yen Ruosui smiled and said, "Since brother is in the mood, I am naturally willing to accompany you. What do you want to bet on?" "You're smart." Chao Gue patted him and praised. "Let's bet on which academy we'll meet next. I'm sure that it won't be just our 2 academies that have come to Ping City." The people who were listening with interest immediately felt that it was very difficult when they heard the content of the bet. After all, it wasn't just the 5 academies this time. They didn't even know which academy would be participating. How were they supposed to guess? Let's talk about the bet first. The loser will treat everyone here to a drink. How about that? Hearing Chao Gui's words, the crowd had a good impression of him. It didn't matter even if they lost this kind of bet. Moreover, the content of the bet was also very interesting. Although there was a certain element of luck involved, it also depended on the individual's analytical ability. "All right, brother, you can guess first." Yen Ruosui immediately said, "Since you call me brother, of course you have to go first. If anyone else wants to bet, you can also say the name you like. If any of you are wrong, then you can treat everyone together." Chao Gue called out to the others around him. "Then I won't stand on ceremony. I guess it's the Drunken Scripture Hall." Yen Ruosui said, "I also guess it's the Drunken Scripture Hall." Another person said with a smile, "I guess it's the Jitai Academy." A pretty girl said, "I guess it's the Lei Tang Academy." Everyone started guessing, but they could only come up with 3 names. The Drunken Scripture Hall was near here, so the students were most familiar with Pingdu. Many academies would ask their students to wait in the inn when they came here to avoid trouble. The students from the Drunken Scripture Hall were certainly not like this. The Jitai Academy was the only academy in the Yun Nation that had more women. Women always liked to wander around when they came to a new place. As for the Lei Tang Academy, the people from the academy liked to investigate the local prices everywhere they went. The Lei Tang Academy was the academy that had the closest relationship with many chambers of commerce. "Brother, what are you guessing? You can't be the banker. If we don't guess correctly, we won't guess correctly, right?" Yen Ruosui said with a smile. "Why would I do that?" Chao Gue coughed softly. "I guess it's Wangjing Academy." Everyone was surprised. Even Ma Hualong, who was listening to the discussion behind them, found it strange. How could it be Wangjing Academy? "Chao Gue, it's really you. I saw you upstairs just now and thought I got the wrong person. What do you want to do about you and my sister?" A man's angry voice suddenly came from the back of the group. Everyone turned around and saw that the person was actually wearing the uniform of Wangjing Academy. They immediately understood that Chao Gue must have seen the other party upstairs and knew that the other party would definitely look for him. That was why he made such a bet. However, everyone pricked up their ears. What exactly did Chao Gue do to make the old-fashioned students from Wangjing Academy who studied the classics every day disregard his sister's reputation and say such things in public? It's indeed Brother Zhu. I thought you looked like you at first glance. Chao Gue didn't feel like he was caught doing something bad at all. He put his arm around the other party's shoulder and whispered a few words into the other party's ear. "Really?" The person's angry face seemed to relax a little. The truth can't be faked, and the fake can't be real. "Don't worry." Chao Gue laughed. "Xiao Huan. Don't worry. When we return from Lan City, if you say anything false, I'm bound to lose every bet. Humph, I hope you can do what you say." "Brother Zhu, don't worry." Chao Gue pulled the other party to the side. No one knew what he said. Only a few scattered words drifted over, causing everyone's heart to itch even more. After a few words, the other party's expression softened. He nodded at him and turned to leave without paying attention to the others. Everyone, I heard that the best restaurant in Lan City is called Shanhui Restaurant. Chao Gui turned his head and winked at everyone. Brother, we can't miss a drink. Everyone from the Salt Academy laughed. Although they had lost, they didn't mind. Instead, they felt that Chao Gui was very interesting. Moreover, everyone had heard of Chao Gui's reputation. He was one of the most talented disciples of the Shaojiang Academy. At this moment he didn't put on any airs, and everyone liked to make friends with him. Chapter 1031. On the way to the inn, they met the students of Jitai Academy. Most of them were women dressed as men, and they were young and beautiful. When they strolled on the street in groups of 3 to 5, the students of the two academies couldn't take their eyes off them. Of course, the teams from the two academies were also the center of attention. However, the other party's attention was focused on a certain point in the team, Shui Yuanpei, who had red lips and white teeth. On the other hand, the students from the drunken scripture hall, who were closest to this place, were nowhere to be seen. Stay in the inn and don't run around. Dean Yen and I will make a trip to the Protectorate headquarters, Ning Changqing said to the group from the Shaojiang Academy after settling down at the inn. Don't worry, Dean. Chao Gui vowed. Ning Changqing glanced at him. Chao Gui was indeed reassuring, except that he liked to gamble. If he didn't change, sooner or later, he would suffer greatly because of this. The two presidents left for more than 2 hours before returning and gathering everyone together. Our two academies are the last. We will set off for Lan City tomorrow. So many academies are leaving together? Is he riding in that truck? Someone asked curiously. As soon as this question came out, everyone became excited. The truck hadn't been around for a long time. Most people had only heard of its name and hadn't seen it before. However, it was said that this truck was not only extremely fast, but also less bumpy. It was much more comfortable than a horse carriage. Everyone was very interested in this kind of tool that could run more than 1,000 miles in a day. Not a truck. Ning Changqing explained. Tomorrow, we will take a steam train to Lan City. Although he did not know what a steam train was, he still said it in an extremely calm tone, as if he already knew about it. Hearing Ning Changqing's words, many students were astonished. Steam train? What's that? You'll know tomorrow. Now, dismissed. You can wander around nearby, but don't cause trouble. Ning Changqing finished speaking to the crowd and dismissed the students. Dean, what is a steam train? After the students left, the two teachers who accompanied them asked curiously. How would I know? If you ask me, who should I ask? It should be something new that Zhao Prince Consort came up with. Ning Changqing was a little helpless in the face of the question. After he left, many students began to speculate. At the same time, the students of the other academies did the same. However, none of them were very important. Just like the tractor and truck from before, it was hard to guess what they were from their names. Everyone could only look forward to tomorrow. After that, everyone strolled around the flat capital. Naturally, they would meet students from other academies, and some small stories happened along the way. When it was close to evening, many people heard a long, woo sound coming from outside the city. It sounded like the roar of a fierce beast, which surprised everyone. 10 minutes ago, Zidonglai, Hua Qinghua, the officials of the Protectorate, and dozens of city lords were waiting on a concrete platform outside the city. In front of the platform, there were 2 tracks paved with steel. In the past few years, Dayo had invested 100 million kilograms of steel into this project. Such a huge amount of steel was terrifying. It was enough to arm all the aboriginals, from the elderly to the children. However, this 1 million gene of steel seemed to have been thrown into a bottomless pit. Even many warlords and city commanders were secretly guessing what exactly this railway that was being built was. How could Dayo spend such a shocking amount of resources on it? It was only then that everyone realized that the railway was actually a tool, just like trucks and tractors. This made everyone even more astonished. Trucks and tractors were already amazing in everyone's hearts. It only took a day and a half for a truck to travel from Lon City to Flat Capital. Such a speed was unimaginable to everyone. However, they still had to build something called a railway under such circumstances. What exactly would it look like? While everyone was deep in thought, someone first noticed that the ground began to tremble slightly. It's coming, it's coming. There's something on the railway, someone said. Everyone looked over and saw a black dot appear at the end of their line of sight. Following which, the black dot became bigger and bigger. After 10 minutes, everyone gradually opened their mouths and exclaimed in surprise. They saw a 3-meter-tall, 300-meter-long monster that looked like a giant steel worm getting closer and closer. It was a complete steel monster. The front end was made of steel and was shaped like an overturned cylinder. There were 3 chimneys at the top that were emitting smoke, and there were rows of wheels at the bottom. Behind the head, there were 10 compartments with glass on the side. Each compartment was 7 to 8 meters long and was several times larger than the truck. Behind the 10 compartments were 8 black compartments. This steel monster was charging towards them with an unstoppable momentum, causing them to suck in a breath of cold air. Everyone knew that this monster wasn't a real steel monster, just like the truck and tractor. Instead, it was something new. However, it was precisely because of this that it was even more spectacular and terrifying. Woo! The monster let out a long whine, slowed down, and slowly drove past everyone. There's someone inside. Everyone suddenly exclaimed as they looked at the compartment that passed them. They saw a man holding a child and looking at them from a glass window. It's Zhao Prince Consort. It wasn't just Renbaqian. Zi Donglai also saw Tong Jingye, who was grinning from ear to ear. Although they had only met a few times, he had left a deep impression on Renbaqian. Back then, Tong Jingye beat Qin Chuan into the artificial lake at House Yunyan. Then, he took off his pants and peed into the lake. That's too much. Renbaqian smiled at the Empress. After all, they are still a little inexperienced. The train had already traveled more than 40 meters. Fortunately, the platform was large enough. After all, this was the most important hub. In the future, many goods would be loaded onto the train from here, so the platform was specially built to be very large. Very good. The Empress nodded and praised. Well done. I want to reward them. They will be very happy. As soon as the Empress finished speaking, the two of them heard cheers coming from the carriage next to them. Success. Nothing went wrong. Ha, we finally succeeded. This was the second trial run of this train. The first trial run didn't reach Pingdu, and not many people knew about it. This time, it was different. A grand ceremony was held in Lan City. Not only Renbaqian and the Empress, but many court officials also took this train to broaden their horizons. There were also many students who constantly designed, adjusted, experimented, and made modifications for this day. Now that the train had safely arrived at the Yun Nation, they could finally cheer heartily. It looks like they have received the best reward. The Empress smiled when she heard the cheers from the carriage next to her. The train slowly came to a stop. Even so, Your Majesty's reward can't be lacking. Renbaqian laughed heartily and stood up. He put Lu Hua on the ground, held her hand, and walked out. It's time to go out and meet them. Before getting off, Renbaqian walked through another carriage, opened the door of the third, and smiled at the many students who were still excited. Now, it's time for you to go out and receive the admiration and praise from everyone. Chapter 1032. When they opened the door, they were greeted by a burst of noise and admiration. Even though they had seen tractors, trucks, telephones, and other things, the impact of the train didn't diminish at all. The combination of huge size and steel always formed a unique sense of beauty. The mechanical parts and gears became the best decorations. Greetings, Zhao Prince Consort and Your Highness. Where's Her Majesty? Zi Donglai stepped forward and asked. At the back. Renbaqian nodded at everyone. Then he pointed at the young people who came down from behind him and said, Let me introduce to all of you the biggest contributors this time around. They are the first-year students from Black Bamboo Academy. They are the ones who turned the blueprint into reality. They made the steel behemoth like the steam train appear in the world. The first person to jump down from behind Rinpoche was Tong Lon, who was dressed in white. Tong Lon was 1.7 meters tall, had a slim figure, and a delicate appearance. She had a unique temperament that was a combination of heroism, wisdom, and self-confidence. She amazed everyone the moment she got off the train. Following her were Shurgan and the other students. The oldest among them was 25 years old. Unlike the Aboriginals, who could be seen everywhere, their 7 years of learning had given them a heroic bearing that was different from barbarism. Even if they were standing in a crowd, they could be easily distinguished at a glance. Everyone got off the train and stood in a row. Rinpoche let go of Lu Hua and applauded. "You guys have succeeded. Well done. At your age, no one can do better than you." Following Rinpoche's actions, everyone applauded. Although there was applause in this world, it wasn't a ritual like it was on Earth. However, with Zhao Prince Consort applauding in front, everyone naturally followed suit. This kind of action was easy to understand. For a moment, the atmosphere was quite enthusiastic. Rinpoche looked at the excited expressions on everyone's faces. After all, apart from Shurgan and Tong Lon, everyone present was abandoned by their families a few years ago. Even they couldn't see any hope for the future. Over time, as Rinpoche demonstrated all kinds of tools that changed people's lives, their treatment steadily improved. At that time, they already knew that they would receive honor and admiration one day. However, when this day really came, they felt a sense of excitement and satisfaction from the bottom of their hearts. It was like an electric current coursing through their bodies, causing them to tremble. Rinpoche seemed to know what everyone was thinking. He smiled and asked, "What are your thoughts?" "It didn't explode. We were so lucky," Du Laolu said. "There was a period of pressure that I couldn't release. I thought I was going to ascend to heaven." What greeted him were more than 10 cold gazes and more than 20 sympathetic gazes. One had to know that this wasn't a trial. The Empress, Yagüe, and many of the court officials were on the train. If the train were to explode into the sky, they didn't even dare to imagine such a scene. One could imagine the pressure they were under. Fortunately, they arrived safely. You can keep such thoughts to yourself. Rinpoche was so angry that he almost laughed. "Do you have to be so direct?" Very good, Xiaolin did well. As the minister of the Ministry of Works, he attached more importance to the means of transportation than anyone else, especially when his granddaughter, Tong Lon, was among them. "It's not just me." In a rare moment of modesty, Tong Lon added in her heart, "At most, half of the credit belongs to me. She is indeed my granddaughter." Tong Jinye laughed heartily. "Of course, the others have done well. The Ministry of Works welcomes all of you. How about it? Working at the Ministry of Works will give you a chance to display your talents. As for your studies, it doesn't matter. Just come to the Ministry of Works when you have nothing to do. The Ministry of Revenue will also give you a chance to display your talents." Tu Wan put on her sunglasses and smiled at everyone after getting off the train. "The Ministry of War is the home of the brave. Come to the Ministry of War and follow me. Let them play with their eggs." Qin Chuan's loud voice could be heard before he even got off the train. "They still have 3.5 years to graduate." Rinpoche glanced at the crowd and reminded them. He added in his heart, "Graduate from university." More than 20 officials from various ministries got off the train, and the warlords who were waiting here felt their foreheads break out in sweat. Most of these warlords were only at the man-will level, and the strongest two had just advanced to the earth-will level. In front of more than 20 cardinal heaven experts, there was a lot of pressure. "Your Majesty!" When the Empress, who was wearing a red dress and had her hair casually draped behind her, appeared, everyone immediately cupped their fists and greeted her. "Mother!" Erhua turned around and threw himself into the Empress's arms. The Empress grabbed him by the neck and shoved him to Zhu Hua, who was following behind. The Empress nodded at everyone and walked to the front of the students. With a faint smile on her face, she praised, "Well done. Zhao Prince Consort didn't waste so much effort on you. I hope that you can create the future of the human race. Yes, Your Majesty. Everyone was excited. Rinpochian put his hands behind his back, paused for a moment, and turned to look at the Empress. She actually said, human race, instead of, Dayo. Then he smiled. After so many years, the Empress had finally begun to change. Not only him, but Tong Xinye and the other officials also understood the meaning behind her words. Let's introduce the steam train. The Empress looked at everyone with a gaze full of admiration. Most of them looked at Shurgan, and a few looked at Tong Lan. Among the students, these two were the strongest. Although strength wasn't considered in the academy, the concept of strength was already deeply rooted in everyone's bones. Many students subconsciously regarded these two as their representatives. Furthermore, they weren't just strong, but also did well in their studies and other aspects. For example, Shurgan was good at coordinating and contacting many students and other departments. As for Tong Lan, she had overhauled the steam train's blueprint dozens of times. The current steam train was designed according to Tong Lan's ideas and the collective efforts of everyone. Shurgan gently patted Tong Lan's arm. Tong Lan stepped forward, glanced at everyone, and then said to Zidonglai and the city officials, "The Empress's steam train is officially known as Laboratory Number 77. It has a total of 19 carriages, each 24.6 meters long and 3.1 meters wide. The height between the roof and the track surface is 4.47 meters, and it weighs 93,400 kilograms. The first carriage is the locomotive, and the second is a simplified version for the imperial family. The production of the carriages for the imperial family takes a year, and the dean is in charge of this. The third to sixth carriages are double-decker berths, and each carriage can carry 36 passengers. The seventh carriage is the dining carriage. The 8th to 11th carriages are passenger carriages, and each carriage can carry 80 passengers. The 12th to 19th carriages are freight carriages, 13 meters long, and each carriage can carry 120 kilograms of cargo. According to different requirements, a freight carriage can be fully loaded with passenger carriages or cargo carriages. Due to the limitations of the platform's length, the former can haul up to 18 passenger carriages, and when all the carriages are passenger carriages, it can carry up to 1,500 passengers. The maximum number of cargo carriages is 24, and the load is 2.8 million kilograms. When it's not fully loaded, the speed is 32 kilometers per hour, which is 128 kilometers per hour. When it's fully loaded, the speed is 25 kilometers per hour, which is 100 kilometers per hour. Hiss. Everyone inhaled one after another, as though they were having a toothache. They didn't know much about other things, but it could carry 1,500 people at a time? It could carry 2,800,000 kilograms of cargo at a time? How many horse carriages and ox carts were this equivalent? Or how many tractors and trucks were this equivalent? According to horse carriages, the largest horse carriage needed 5 horses to carry 20 people. When it came to transporting goods, the load of an ox cart was usually 5,000 kilograms. In other words, the load of the steel beast was equivalent to the load of 400 horses and 80 horse carriages. As for the load, it was equivalent to the load of 560 ox carts. As for the speed, it wasn't even worth comparing. Even Tong Xinye and the rest who had heard it before couldn't calm down when they heard it again, let alone the people who heard it for the first time. First, set a small goal, such as 1 second. Chapter 1033. Due to the Aboriginals' human form, the 5 seats on Earth were changed to 4. At the same time, the depth of the seats was also increased. As a result, the 118 passenger carriages on Earth could only carry 80 people. Similarly, the number of passengers in the hard sleeper carriages was also greatly reduced. Even so, the emergence of trains was a huge impact on transportation and travel in this world. With Rinpochian's promotion, trains and other means of transportation in this world would be promoted to the entire territory of Dayo at a speed that was dozens of times faster than in Rinpochian's previous life. For example, there is only one railway track from point A to point C, and two railway tracks are set up at point B. In this way, the trains to and fro can cross each other at point B. This was also a method often used on Earth. Through this method, there could be up to 8 trains on the route from Lon City to Pingdu. In terms of cargo transportation alone, more than 5 million kilograms of cargo could be transported every day. In this era, it could be considered an astronomical figure. However, with the existence of tractors and trucks, the current requirement for carrying capacity wasn't that high. Therefore, Rinpoche estimated that there would be a total of 4 trains per day, with half of the passengers and half of the cargo. In other words, there would be 2 trains departing from Lon City or Pingdu every day. This carrying capacity could be said to be enough for a few years. After all, the people of the Yun Nation and the Aboriginals didn't have the habit of visiting or traveling to another area. As a result, there wouldn't be a peak traffic flow like on Earth. After all, the people coming and going were the chambers of commerce, a small number of scholars, and officials with official duties. The ordinary people of this world couldn't walk more than 50 kilometers away from their homes in their lifetime. In the next few years, when many people had gotten used to traveling by train, the number of trains could be gradually increased. The next new railway plan was to connect Pingdu to Wangjing and Lon City to the 60,000 mountains. The construction of these 2 railways would take 5 years. In this way, the transportation from the east to the central and western regions and from the south to the central and northern regions could be completed. After that, it would be from Lon City to the Protectorate of the North and the Protectorate of the Southeast. In this way, Lon City would become Daeyeou's only transportation hub. The location of the new city would be more than 100 kilometers away from Lon City. It would only take 4 hours by train, and it would be the political center of Daeyeou. These people? Is that the Empress? Why is the Empress here? Chao Gue stood at the back of the crowd and looked at the approaching group. When he saw who it was, his pupils shrank. Although he had never seen the Empress in person, he had seen a portrait of her. Moreover, even if he had never seen the portrait before, he could guess his identity just by looking at his posture and bearing, as well as the way Zidonglai followed behind him. Should we go back and inform the dean? A student from the Shaojiang Academy asked. What's the point of notifying him now? Let's take a look first, Chao Gue replied without turning his head. His gaze lingered on the Empress for a moment before moving on to the crowd. Is that Zhao Prince Consort? What a shiny head, just like in the legends. These people seem to be spirit wheel experts? It was simply terrifying. In terms of high-end martial arts, the imperial court was simply too terrifying. Be it the original imperial court, the Qin nation, or the Great Xia, none of them can compare. Who are these people? She didn't look very old. What a beautiful girl. He looks so young, but his strength is actually a level higher than mine. Terrifying. City Lord Yujiang and Liang City Lord are following behind them? There's also Guzong, Zhongqing, City Lord Suan. They're all nearby city lords. It looks like they already knew that the emperor was coming. Ma Hualong pointed out a few people beside him. What do you think? Chao Gue asked softly. Since these city lords are here, the empress shouldn't be going to other cities. It's very likely that she's really going to Lon City with us. Aren't those spirit will experts the ministers of the imperial court? Since the empress, Zhao Prince Consort, and so many ministers are here, there must be something important that involves the entire Yun nation. After the procession was far away, Chao Gue pulled Ma Hualong along and said, "Let's go back." It wasn't just Chao Gue and the other students from the Shaojiang Academy who were watching this procession. There were also students from Jitai, Wangjing, Jiangling, and many other academies. No one expected that the Empress would suddenly come to Pingdu while they were gathering in Pingdu and heading to Lon City. She even brought along all the court officials. This made everyone speculate after they returned. No matter what their intentions are, it's not something we can participate in now. Our goal this time is still the same as before, to suppress the other academies in the exchange, someone said in the inn where the Jiangling Academy was staying. Only when we enter the imperial court will we have a chance to speak up. Brother Huaining is right. Everyone, don't be distracted at this time, another person said. Everyone nodded. In the inn where the Wangjing Academy was staying, 5 people sat together. If we suppress the other academies, embarrass the Black Bamboo Academy, and then reject the Imperial Court's recruitment, I think they will look very good, a scholar said with a strange smile. That's right. Before we came, we were already prepared to sacrifice ourselves for a righteous cause. If they really fly into a rage out of humiliation and slaughter the students who are going to Lan City, then the people of the world and those who are content in their own corner will be able to see the true colors of these barbarians. Their previous conciliatory methods will become a joke. You have to know that we were invited by them. If they want to subdue the scholars and hold back their anger, then we must become the heroes of the scholars. Another scholar with a pair of reptilian eyes scanned the people in front of him and said, his eyes were filled with bone-deep hatred. If they became the heroes of the scholars, even if the Imperial Court of Dayo wanted to do anything in the future, they would have to consider the reactions of the scholars. Since ancient times, the writers of the scholars couldn't be offended. The other 3 people remained silent and played with the wine cups in their hands. But haven't the 3 of you made up your minds? Don't forget that we have studied many classics. How can we easily side with those barbarians? Brother Tu Jia, the warlord of Wenshur City, Duke Tu, was killed by those barbarians. If you had stayed in the academy, I wouldn't have said anything else. But since you are here, are you going to work for the enemy who killed your father? One of the 3 people immediately crushed his wine cup with an ashen face. Jitai Academy, that student from Shaojiang Academy is so handsome today. Little girl, are you moved? Along with the voice was a series of laughter and playful voices. The next morning, many academies with different thoughts left Pingdu and went to a wasteland in the north of the city under the lead of the soldiers. Look, the people from Wangjing Academy, Jiangling Academy, Baiquan Academy, and Fenghu Academy. The 5 academies are finally here. Chao Gui nudged Ma Hualong's shoulder and said, what surprises me the most is that those old-fashioned fellows from Wangjing Academy actually came. Ma Hualong glanced around and said in bewilderment. While they were sizing up others, others were sizing them up too. Among them, there were only 7 students from Wangjing Academy, 15 from General Academy, 13 from Baiquan Academy, and 20 from Fenghu Academy, the same as Shaojiang Academy. In addition, there were many other academies. At a glance, all the famous academies in the Yun nation were here. In front of them, a row of buildings had appeared on a piece of flat land that was originally outside Pingdu City. The first 2-story pavilion was more than 30 meters wide, and the words, Pingdu Train Station, were written on the top. On both sides of the pavilion was a row of walls that tightly blocked the inside. What's a train? Everyone was puzzled again. They had heard of it once yesterday, and now they saw it again. Baidu search 881 Chinese network yen. No advertising words. Chapter 1034. After passing through the train station, everyone finally saw the so-called train. It was a 400-meter-long steel monster with sections that looked like a huge centipede. However, it didn't have as many legs as a centipede. What a big guy! After Chao Gui finished speaking, he started laughing. He couldn't help but let out a hee-hee sound. What's so funny? Tell me. Ma Hualong tried to make his eyes bigger, but they were only slightly bigger than peanuts. Although Shui Yuanpei was expressionless, he pricked up his ears to listen to Chao Gui's opinion. I just feel that I've seen more new things in the past few years than before. Chao Gui counted. Tractors, trucks, glass, a clock, the steam engine we saw last time, and this big fellow in front of us. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this big fellow will perform. Zhao Prince Consort. Ma Hualong said a name. Everything was brought about by this person. It could be said that this person had changed the entire Dayo and the Yun nation. Do you think there's a relationship between intelligence and hair? The dean doesn't have much hair either. Chao Gui raised an interesting point. Zhao Prince Consort doesn't have a single strand of hair, not even eyebrows. You can try. You'll be smart if you go bald. Ma Hualong encouraged. I really want to try. Chao Gui didn't seem to be lying, and he really had the urge to do so. Their conversation made Shui Yuanpei's face turn black. You won't be smart even if you go bald. Also, if the dean hears you say that he has little hair, you will be punished with a ruler again. The ruler was a type of board made of 2 pieces of wood stuck together. It was 8 feet and 2 fen long, and when hit by the hand, it would produce a loud sound without much strength. It was a warning sound. Of course, it would be quite painful if you hit it hard. Chao Gui rolled his eyes and said to Ma Hualong, "Do you want to make a bet? I'm guessing that the dean has 864 strands of hair." "You want me to count the dean's hair?" Ma Hualong squinted at him. "You're too vicious." "Ha, I'm just joking." Chao Gui laughed and didn't take it seriously. It was just a joke. Then, his gaze fell on a lady in white who got off the train. She was about 17 or 18 years old, wearing a long white dress with pink flower petals as embellishments. Her long hair was simply tied behind her head. She was beautiful and her skin was fair. She gave off the vibe of the most beautiful white flower on the highest peak of the Yun nation. Her stubbornness and purity were mixed together, as well as her heroic spirit and intellectuality, forming a very unique charm. The woman merely swept a cold glance at the crowd before she continued walking forward. "What's wrong? The girl you couldn't forget yesterday?" Ma Hualong noticed his gaze and teased, "Your eyes are about to pop out. I feel like I've been shot in the chest." Chao Gui clutched his chest with an infatuated look in his eyes, unwilling to leave the figure of the other party for even a moment. "Let me give you a piece of advice. These clothes aren't something an ordinary aboriginal can wear. I'm sure there's someone in their family with a high status. Moreover, her strength is stronger than yours. Looking at her age, her talent must be amazing. No matter what you think, you have no chance." Ma Hualong comforted him sincerely. Zhao Prince Consort doesn't even have a spirit wheel, yet he married the noble empress. Chao Gui waited until the figure of the other party disappeared into one of the carriages before he turned his head and said seriously to Ma Hualong, "Let's make a bet. I'll bet my entire life on it." "You're crazy." Ma Hualong's expression changed slightly when he heard what the other party said. He felt that the other party was simply crazy. "We are good friends, right?" Chao Gui felt that his heart was burning so hot that it was about to burn him. "What are you going to do?" Ma Hualong asked warily. "In a while, find an opportunity to flirt with her. Then, I'll be the hero and save the damsel in distress." Although this move is cliché, it's tried and true. Chao Gui looked straight into the other party's eyes and tried to convey his determination to him through his gaze. "You are crazy, but I'm not." Ma Hualong was shocked. He was going to flirt with her? Not to mention anything else, the other party's strength was enough to crush him to death with one hand. "Don't worry, I'll appear at the right time." Chao Gui immediately vowed. He naturally knew that Ma Hualong wasn't a match for the other party, but he didn't necessarily have to be the hero and save the damsel in distress. He just had to appear at the right time and leave a deep enough impression on the other party. It wasn't impossible for the hero to save the hooligan. "Tong Lon, what are those people doing?" Yu Wui, who was inspecting the condition of the train, wiped the black coal off his face and asked. "I don't know," Tong Lon replied casually. "How's the condition of the equipment?" "There was a problem with the pressure relief previously, and the third valve of the equipment was slightly damaged. If everything goes well, we should be able to return," Yu Wui replied. "If anything goes wrong, you'll be hung up for target practice. Although Yagüe seems to be kinder these 2 years, you and I both know that's just a facade. If he makes a fool of himself in front of Her Majesty, you can imagine the consequences. He'll be sentenced to at least 10 minutes of target practice." Tong Lon used a calm tone to describe the terrifying content, which made Yu Wui shudder. "Don't say such scary things, okay?" Yu Wui had a bitter look on his face, but it was obvious that he was inspecting more carefully. "Excuse me, let me take a look at the third valve." Tong Lon kicked him and went forward to check the condition of the pressure relief valve. "There's no problem with the distribution valve." A young girl withdrew her head and said, just like Yu Wui, her face was covered in dust. After a while, Tong Lan inspected the condition of the locomotive and returned to the carriage where everyone was. As soon as she entered the carriage, she heard laughter. Did you see that? Those guys' eyeballs are glued to Tong Lan. Should I say that they are blind or that their courage is commendable? Both. Du Laolu rubbed his chin and pondered. Little girl, you've grown up. It's a pity that she's too fierce. No one in Lan City dares to propose marriage. Shirgan. The previous voice continued. Two veins popped out on Tong Lan's forehead. She flashed and stepped on Su Peng's head. Gah! Su Peng was about to continue speaking, but he was stomped back into his stomach. Following which, she kicked Du Lao's face. Tong Lan then flashed back to her seat. Both of you don't have a good memory after so many years. Not far away, Shirgan was trying his best to pull his neck up while the other was trying to stop his nosebleed. Are you done with the inspection? Tong Lan turned her head and glanced at him with a cold gaze. There's no problem with the hooks between the bogie and the carriage. Shirgan spread his hands and said, as long as there's no problem with the power unit, it's fine. There's a small problem, but it's not a big problem. Yu Wui and Wu Ye were on duty for the first 4 hours, followed by Peng Shi and Peng Zhi. Tong Lan took a form from the table and flipped through it as she spoke. After a while, she put down the form and looked out of the window. Who are those people? Some scholars from the academies in the Yun Nation. It seems like they are going to board this Empress and return to Lan City with us. A young man supported his chin with one hand and flipped through a calculus book on the table with the other. Their appearance here must be an order from Her Majesty or Yagüe. Given Her Majesty's character, she wouldn't do such a thing. It should be Yagüe. Shirgan also glanced at the scholars outside, who were clicking their tongues in wonder at the train. It seems like Yagüe is very interested in them. Another scholar laughed. There are too few aboriginals, Tong Lan replied without even lifting her head. Yagüe said that he wants to implement universal education, but it won't be possible to achieve results in a short period of time. The number of teachers is also a problem. I reckon that Yagüe has taken a liking to them. They should be competent enough to be teachers. Actually, I really want to be a teacher. I have even prepared target shooting equipment. I even specially got someone to get me a box of repeating crossbows from the Yun Nation, but Yagüe didn't give me this opportunity. Another student spread his hands. Another 3.5 years. A pretty lady with a graceful figure clenched her fist and said, we will graduate in another 3.5 years. Sighed. Everyone in the carriage sighed. 3 years and another 3 years. Have you guys finished your calculus homework? Let me copy it. Du Laolu, who had just stopped bleeding, suddenly had a change in expression. Half of the people in the carriage had a similar change in expression. Not only did they have a huge change in expression, but they also had a deep hatred for Du Laolu for bringing up the matter that no one wanted to think about. Shirgan, just let me have a look at your homework. I definitely won't be like that fool who even copied his name. Su Peng said. It's in the residence. Shirgan spread his hands. You guys work harder. Get on the train. Follow the order of the academies. Don't run around after getting on the train. There is a bathroom in every carriage, and meals will be provided in the middle, someone in front of the group of scholars shouted. The preparations are very thorough. We can finally set off. I'm really curious about how this big guy will bring us to Lan City. Zhou Wu Academy, Yendao Academy, Shaojiang Academy, come over here. Huaya Academy, Shuangwen Academy, Jiangling Academy, go that way. Many scholars boarded the train in order with curiosity and anticipation. The Empress stood on the second floor of the train station and watched everything. Do you think these people are useful? The Empress asked. Let's give it a try. Maybe we can find some useful talents. After all, they have studied for more than 10 years, and it would be a pity to just leave them there, Rinpochian answered while turning his head to look at Erhua. He saw Erhua running around with Zidonglai's saber in his hand. From time to time, he would pull out his saber and split a row of wooden blocks. He even made sounds of ha. Needless to say, Erhua was pretty good at drawing his saber and slashing. Not far away, Zidonglai stared at Erhua expressionlessly. Although it couldn't be seen on his face, Rinpochian could feel his heart aching from his gaze. Inspector Hua, although you and the Protector General are from the same family, I still hope that you can fulfill your duties. Rinpochian turned around and said to Hua Qinghua, who had a tattoo on her face and exuded a wild aura from head to toe. She didn't seem to mind Zidonglai standing beside her. Of course, I've been watching him 24/7. Hua Qinghua patted her magnificent chest and guaranteed. Zidonglai's expressionless face finally couldn't help but twitch a little. Baidu search Yunlai Pavilion's novel website and let you experience the fastest novel updates. All the novels are updated in seconds. Chapter 1035. The carriage was very spacious. After all, it was designed according to the size of the Aboriginals. There were only 4 seats in each row, and the gap between the 2 opposite seats was also very large. All the seats in the carriage were made of pure leather. This was mainly because Dayo produced a large number of fork-horned cattle and sheepskins every day. They were extremely cheap, and the merchants preferred those precious furs. Upon seeing this, Rinpochian simply bought leather and used it on all his products. This included the sofa, the seats, the cab of the tractor and the truck, and even the surface of the table clock. He would nail a layer of cowhide to it. It had to be said that using animal skin was much more environmentally friendly than using paint. As for cheap substitutes like leather, there was no need for them at all. Of course, leather, which was extremely cheap in Dayo, was still a little extravagant for the people of the Yun Nation. However, in the eyes of the students, this was a train, and it was natural to use all kinds of luxurious decorations. Therefore, they didn't find it strange at all and just felt that it should be like this. As the train roared, everyone in the carriage felt the carriage shake. At the same time, they could see the scenery on both sides beginning to move. It's moving! For most of the students, this feeling was very novel. Although everyone had the experience of sitting in a carriage, it was their first time sitting in the stomach of such a huge steel monster. They looked out of the window as if it was their first time going out. It seems to be getting faster and faster. It's really fast, much faster than a carriage. It's also much steadier than a carriage and more comfortable than those trucks. How many soldiers do you think this thing can carry? Look at these seats. One carriage can carry 80 people. I counted before coming up just now. Including the shorter ones, there are a total of 19 carriages. It should be able to transport 1,500 people. If we remove the seats, we can probably double the number of people. How does this thing move? Judging from the previous shaking, it seems like it's being pulled by something. It should be that black monster head. It's faster than a horse. It's hard to imagine that it can move faster than a horse while dragging such a big thing. Look at both sides. It's made of iron. This thing is much heavier than I thought. Plus, it's carrying so many people. After all, they were students from many universities. If it were an ordinary person, they would probably sigh and not have any other thoughts. After a short period of curiosity, they quickly studied the function and power of this train. However, the things they were curious about were things that they had never come into contact with or even considered before. Naturally, they couldn't study anything. Rinpochian asked someone to bring Shurgan and Tong Lon over. Greetings, Your Majesty, Your Highness. Give these to them and let them write down their answers. Rinpochian handed a stack of white paper to them. The two of them glanced at it. There was a very simple question on it. Those scholars from the Yun Nation. Shurgan said with certainty. Rinpochian nodded. Isn't it too simple? Tong Lon had a doubtful look on her face. In the eyes of the Aboriginals, scholars from the Yun Nation and Great Xia had always been synonymous with knowledge. The poems that were occasionally passed on, as well as the ancient books hidden in the houses of many ministers, all came from them. On the one hand, the Aboriginals were confident in their martial prowess and felt that they could fight against 18 Aboriginals alone. On the other hand, he felt that the other party was very knowledgeable. Even the students of the academy couldn't avoid this kind of perception. Tong Lon had previously looked down on them because she knew that Yague's teachings couldn't be learned anywhere else. But in his heart he also acknowledged their attainments in knowledge. That was why she said, at the very least, they are competent in the field of enlightenment education. Otherwise, with her pride, she would have sent them back to the furnace to be remade. That's not necessarily the case. Ren Baqian smiled. Got it. The two of them nodded and left with 2 stacks of white paper with a question on it. The students from the Yun Nation were still discussing the steel monster that they were riding when they saw 2 people coming from the other side of the passage. One of them was a burly man with a big beard, and the other was the goddess-like woman in white that they had just seen. Both of you? Someone stood up and wanted to ask. This was because they weren't allowed to pass through the carriages to go to the previous one. There must be a reason why the other party was here. Where's your dean? Shurgan asked with a gentle smile. I am. May I know what business you have with me? An old man stood up and asked. Zhao Prince Consort hopes that you can answer this question. Shurgan left 80 pieces of white paper in his hand. Everyone just needs to write down the answer in your heart and leave your name. Following Shurgan's words, the old man's gaze suddenly changed. Was this a test? Did they want to see the strength of the various academies? The old man took the paper and looked at it. There was only one line on it. Are you still or moving? What's the reason? After the two of them left under everyone's gaze, the old man got someone to distribute the paper to everyone. Although many people were still thinking about the woman in white, they knew what was more important at this moment and looked at the paper in their hands one after another. Still? We obviously didn't move. I was wondering what it would be, but it turned out to be such a simple question. It can't be that simple. There must be some mystery in it. I also don't think it's that simple. It should be movement. We have been moving along with the train. This question is interesting. I think it's correct to say that it's still or moving. It seems that any answer is correct. Any answer is correct, which means that any answer is wrong. Some people began to think about whether there was any relevant discussion in the ancient books that they had learned. Unfortunately, no matter how he rummaged through his mind, he couldn't find anything related to it. Chao Gui looked at Tong Lan's back view as she left. He really wanted to push Ma Hualong off the train when Tong Lan passed by. He could then use his rude behavior as an excuse to apologize and continue the conversation. Unfortunately, Ma Hualong seemed to have guessed what he was thinking. Ma Hualong stepped aside and stared at him. Sitting with you is a mistake, Ma Hualong complained in a low voice. You are crazy. You are a woman. Have you never seen a woman before? It's different this time. It's completely different. Chao Gui shook his head and stood up to receive a paper. After reading it, he pondered for a moment and looked out of the window for a moment. Then he took out a pen and an inkstone from his bag and went to the washroom to get an inkstone. He wrote, "It's both moving and still. Moving is compared to the outside of this steel beast, while being still is compared to the steel beast. Our movement and stillness are not solely determined by ourselves, but are related to the environment we are in." Ma Hualong, who was beside him, was also writing at a rapid pace. When both parties put down their pens, they looked at each other and smiled. Let's make a bet. Our answers are the same, Chao Gui said. No, you are crazy now. Wangjing College. Moving or still? What's the use of asking such a question? What's the use of such a question for governing the country and the people? Zhou Rui looked at the paper in his hand and snorted. What do you think the meaning of asking such a question is? Based on Zhao Prince Consort's actions, I'm afraid he's trying to find someone who fits his criteria. From his actions, it can be seen that he has been using conciliatory methods in order to bring the people of the Yun Nation under the rule of the Aboriginals. In order to govern people, there must be someone who can govern them. I'm afraid the Aboriginals don't have anyone they can use. Let's not talk about the traitors first. It can be seen from the fact that the selected city commanders are all from the Yun Nation. I'm afraid what he wants to do now is to find someone who fits his criteria, just as I guessed. How should I answer this question? It wasn't until noon that someone came to take the paper away and leave another paper behind. What made Chao Gui regret was that the person who came wasn't the woman in white. I must ask her name next time, Chao Gui thought to himself. Chao Gure thought to himself as he took the second test paper from the side. He only took a glance at it and was immediately stunned. Bachelor tax. Unmarried 25-year-olds will have to pay 1 tax a year, unmarried 30-year-olds will have to pay 2 taxes, unmarried 35-year-olds will have to pay 3 taxes, and so on. Every tax is 10% of the annual salary. What do you think about this bachelor tax? How will it be implemented? What kind of impact will it have? The entire carriage was in an uproar after seeing the questions on the paper. Even the deans of the various academies were at a loss. Baidu searched the novel website of Yunlai Pavilion to let you experience the latest and fastest novel chapters. All the novels are updated in seconds. Chapter 1036. I can't understand it, I can't accept it, it's simply ridiculous. The carriage that Jitai Academy was in emitted waves of complaints. In the Yun nation, women couldn't become officials and could get married at the age of 16. Most of the women in the academy were over 20 years old. They could be said to be the typical unmarried young women with high academic qualifications. Usually, it was not rare to see his family busy arranging marriages for him. He did not expect to see someone urging him to get married again, and it was the imperial court urging him to get married. The female students of Jitai Academy were going crazy. I'm going crazy. I've never heard of a bachelor tax. A woman grabbed the hair on her head, and the veins on her forehead bulged. Not only them, but the male and female students of the other academies also reacted the same way. It was just that the male's reaction was slightly slower. Although it was just a test paper, it had already explained a lot of problems. Ridiculous. This is ridiculous. It's not just ridiculous, it's ridiculous. Bachelor tax? I've never heard of such a thing. A few scholars from Wangjing Academy looked at the examination papers in their hands and loudly refuted with an incredulous tone. His voice wasn't soft, but no one found it strange. Even students from other academies thought this single tax was unheard of, let alone Wangjing Academy, which was known for being old-fashioned. Previously, when I saw the Aboriginals adopting a conciliatory policy in the Yun nation, I thought that Zhao Prince Consort was someone with a deep heart. I didn't expect him to propose such an absurd idea. Wangjing Academy's Zhou Rui was livid. I think it's a good thing. Chang Lu, who had eyes like a reptile, gave off a cold feeling when she looked at someone. After thinking for a long time, she raised her head with a playful expression. Such a reason to increase taxes is simply absurd to the extreme. What good thing is this? A scholar snorted lightly. Zhou Rui calmed down after hearing this. After thinking for a while, he whispered, Brother Chang is right. The more absurd the imperial court of Dayo is, the better it is. If that's the case, it'll be easy. We just have to follow Zhao Prince Consort's wishes. Bachelor tax. Du Laolu smacked his lips and looked expectant. I really want to pay the tax. I'll tell that person of yours when we get back. Su Peng said contemptuously. He can beat 8 of you with one hand. Ahem, I'm looking forward to you guys paying taxes. Du Laolu immediately changed his tune. Remember that you still have some private money? Do you want money or your life? Su Peng smiled maliciously and poked him with his elbow. When someone saw Tong Lan sitting there with a pensive look on her face, he laughed and said, Why? Are you thinking about paying taxes? You still have years to go. Some of us here have to pay taxes. Humph. Tong Lan snorted. She didn't really care about 10% of her annual salary. And she's only 17 this year. She was thinking about what Yagüe was thinking and what kind of impact the bachelor tax would have. In fact, those who find it difficult to get married are the weakest, and those with the lowest incomes. If this single tax is really introduced, the pressure on them to survive will be even greater. Shirgan twirled a pen in his hand as he spoke. That is indeed the case. This plan is inappropriate. Our aboriginals are better off, but it's the commoners at the bottom of the Yun nation. It's not easy for them to survive. If we increase their tax burden, I'm afraid there will be repercussions. The one who spoke was Shiryu. Although he had the same surname as Shirgan, he was a commoner. He was also the only commoner student left in this batch. Rebound? Just kill them. In any case, they are all incompetent people. Tong Lan said coldly. Do you really think so? Shirgan smiled and looked at her. Tong Lan had changed a lot over the years. Even though she often punched and kicked Du Laolu, Su Peng, and the other students, she had never bullied any of the commoners in the school. This last, Tong Lan, always said one thing but thought another. They are just some useless people from the Yun Nation, Tong Lan replied without looking up. Shirgan smiled and didn't say anything. I don't know why, but Yagüe always seems to be very anxious and seems to be planning something. Therefore, he values the people from the Jing tribe and the Yun Nation a lot and wants to use them to solve the problem of manpower shortage. This time, it's obvious that Yagüe is going to pick some people from the Yun Nation, so he won't start a massacre in the Yun Nation, sure you analyzed. As for why Yagüe was so anxious, she wasn't sure. However, there were some students who were clear about this. For example, Shirgan and Tong Lan. They all knew why he was so anxious. However, most of them didn't know. Even though these students were the descendants of court officials, most of them were collateral relatives, so they naturally wouldn't know about such an important matter. Rinpochen carefully looked through the examination papers and picked out more than a dozen of them. Did you find anything? The Empress was combing Hua's long ponytail. Even though this looked like something a biological mother would do, it was just a whim. Or rather, she was a little bored in the car. The number of times the Empress had combed Hua's hair over the past 3 years could be counted with one hand. Hua enjoyed it very much as she lay on the Empress's knees, raised and lowered her legs behind her, and drew circles on her clothes with her fingers. Rinpochen took out more than a dozen examination papers and handed them to the Empress. These people look good. I don't want to read them. I don't understand them. The Empress waved her hand. Rinpochen smiled and took the examination papers back. Even though these examination papers didn't explain the relationship between stillness, movement, and reference objects concisely, the meaning was there. If they were given more time, they might be able to summarize it in more incisive terms. He had to admit that the standard of these scholars was pretty good. The people in this world weren't lacking in wisdom. They just lacked shoulders that were tall enough and a different way of thinking. At night, Rinpochen asked someone to distribute the third set of examination questions. Not long after, someone sent the answers to the second set of questions to him. After flipping through a few pages, Rinpochen laughed. Those female students from Jitai Academy have a lot of resentment. All the female students used various angles to explain how inhumane and tyrannical the bachelor tax was. The resentment of highly educated, older, and unmarried young women hit him in the face. Rinpochen had a faint smile on his face as he looked through the examination papers one by one. Until he saw a few examination papers, he frowned slightly. These examination papers weren't criticizing the bachelor tax, but praising it. They even said things like, a groundbreaking measure not seen in 1,000 years. He looked at the top of the examination papers and saw that they were students from Wangjing Academy. It was the same for a few consecutive examination papers. Rinpochen frowned and pondered for a moment. He flipped through the first examination paper and saw that the answers of the students from Wangjing Academy didn't have any eye-catching insights. 2 of the examination papers were even empty. As for the other 5, 2 of them were vague comments. It was impressive to be able to make vague comments on such an issue. The standard of the other 3 examination papers was very ordinary. Coupled with the exaggerated comments on the bachelor tax, in the second examination paper, Rinpochen immediately gave Wangjing Academy an X in his heart. After that, Rinpochen finished reading all the answers, picked out more than 10 examination papers, and put them aside. He then sighed and said, "They don't live up to their name." "Nothing to your liking?" The Empress, who was playing fishing with Lu Hua out of boredom, looked up at him and then lowered her head again. "Don't tell me you are following the requirements of the students from Black Bamboo Academy?" Rinpochen immediately knew that the Empress had misunderstood and explained, "I'm talking about the top of the 5 big academies, Wangjing Academy." At this point, Rinpoche shook his head slightly and said, "These scholars from Wangjing Academy have improper intentions. The scholars sent by the academy are cunning and malicious toward the imperial court. This is inseparable from the culture and education of the academy. Even if their methods are more brilliant, I would still look up to them. They probably think that I'm a fool. Close down this Wangjing Academy." "Close it down then." The Empress didn't seem to care at all. "If you want to, you can just flatten it to avoid leaving behind any disasters. There's no need. Have you heard of this saying? A scholar's rebellion failed after 3 years. These people can only use small tricks. If they don't repent in the future, then we can execute their 3 families. This will be considered justifiable." The Empress, who was reaching out to clap, paused, looked up at him, and said, "Previously, my father said that those who are knowledgeable are vicious. After seeing you, I believe it. It was just a casual remark. I have already spared their lives from the hands of Her Majesty. If they still act recklessly, then I can only say Amitba." With a few simple sentences, the 2 of them sentenced Wangjing Academy to death. This Chao Gui from Shaojiang Academy is not bad. He actually proposed a method of reducing taxes instead of increasing taxes. He has some insight. Rinpoche then looked at the dozens of examination papers again and found Chao Gui's paper from the first set. The answers on both papers were quite to his liking. In addition, Ma Hualong from Shaojiang Academy, Quan Quaning from Jiangling Academy, Gu Chunxing from Baiquan Academy, and the brothers Wu Fan and Wu Chun from Fenghu Academy were also not bad. There were also some people who weren't as outstanding as these people, but they had a certain level of insight and were worth looking forward to. Next, he waited to see the answers on the 3rd set. It seemed like he would be able to gain something this time. In addition to the scholars from the Yun Nation, some of the students from the academy had also written the 2nd set. The growth of these students made him extremely pleased. Baidu search 081 Chinese network yen. No advertising words. Chapter 1037. Ning Chongqing sat on the seat of the train. Some of the students had already fallen asleep, but he couldn't fall asleep no matter what. His somewhat turbid eyes shone with wisdom and radiance. He already knew that Zhao Prince Consort had gathered so many academies this time to select suitable talents. In addition, he was afraid that he would have some other ideas. For example, he wanted to see the current thoughts of the Yun Nation scholars and their perception of the imperial court. However, after reading these papers, he felt that he was probably wrong. Although the scholars had always been the target of every dynasty's court, Zhao Prince Consort was different. He didn't care about the thoughts of the scholars. Judging from his previous actions, he had always been resolutely doing what he wanted to do. Although the papers were for the students to answer, they also revealed their thoughts. Let's not talk about the first paper. The second paper was about the bachelor tax, which should be for the Aboriginals, right? The Aboriginals didn't have a large population, but with their talents, if their population was the same as the Yun Nations, there would be no place for other races in this world. As for the third paper, it was the one that touched Ning Chongqing the most. There were 2 questions on it. One was the integration of ethnic groups, and the other was using trains or tractors as examples to illustrate the relationship between productivity and the economy. There was also an explanation on productivity and the economy. Productivity was divided into natural productivity, and the production of various tools, such as trucks and tractors, belonged to social productivity. The increase of social productivity promoted economic development, and conversely, economic development also required the increase of social productivity. The 2 complemented each other. He had never seen or heard of these remarks before, and he used a few simple words to point out the problems that were closely related to the development of society and the people. The term society was used very well, and it directly included people from all walks of life. Ning Chongqing spent the whole night figuring out the relationship and couldn't speak for a long time. Amazing. Zhao Prince Consort's knowledge was really amazing. After reading this question, he recalled the Dayo Imperial Court's decrees and the new things that Zhao Prince Consort had come up with over the past few years. Many of the problems that had troubled him suddenly became clear. He and the others looked at things from different levels, but Zhao Prince Consort had always looked at the root. That was why he promoted the popularization of tractors at a very low price from the beginning and recruited laborers to build roads a few years after the Yun nation was destroyed. Yi Futian had thought that he was more or less proud of himself, but now it seemed that this was not the case. From what he knew about the current situation of the Chuyun Chamber of Commerce, this was not the case. The goods transported by the merchant associations were no longer the same as before, where they only pursued the most expensive and profitable goods. Instead, they added a large number of goods that were related to the livelihood of the common people. Even if the profit was small, this must be Zhao Prince Consort's order. Thanks to this, the prices of many items in the Yun nation had dropped significantly compared to the previous dynasty, and the lives of the people were actually better. Amazing! Ning Chongqing's brows loosened and tightened as he muttered. "Headmaster, what did you say?" A teacher from the academy beside him asked. "I said it's amazing," Ning Chongqing said again and didn't explain further. From these examination papers, Ning Chongqing realized that Rinpoche's focus was different from most people's. It could be said that he was completely above everyone else. The current imperial court of Dayo was influenced by him, and it was very different from the previous dynasties. If this continued, he didn't know what would happen to Dayo under his influence. "We are finally here. My whole body is stiff from sitting for a day and a half." Chao Gui got off the train and stretched. "A day and a half is too fast. I heard that it used to take half a month to travel this way," Ma Hualong said as he looked at the noon sky. "That's true," Chao Gui agreed. Before the advent of tractors, it was unimaginable to reach Lan City from Pingdu in a day and a half. However, in just a few years, everyone had personally experienced such changes. The feeling was especially obvious when they got off the train. At this time, only the students were at the train station in Lan City. After all of them got off the train, they were brought to Lan City. As for the emperor's entourage, it had already left before they got off the train. Even those young people with unknown identities were gone. "Do you think those people are from the Black Bamboo Academy?" Ma Hualong suddenly asked. "I think so too. I don't know what's waiting for us next. I'm also very curious. I thought that there would be an exchange in Lan City to select talented people. I didn't expect to be tested on the train. I don't know what's waiting for us next," Chao Gui said with a smile. Shui Yuanpei, who had a cold expression on his face, walked to the two of them and seemed to want to say something. "If you have something to say, just say it. Don't beat around the bush." Ma Hualong wasn't polite at all. "What do you think of these questions?" Shui Yuanpei asked. The other two naturally knew that he wasn't asking how they should answer the question. Instead, he was asking for their opinions on the person who set the question. "I think Zhao Prince Consort is different from what we thought," Chao Gui said directly. "I think so too." Ma Hualong smiled and said, "His Highness is famous all over the world for his incomparable heavenly works and miscellaneous skills. Some of the new things in the past few years were created by his hands. Moreover, I heard that he has a good understanding of agriculture. I originally thought that was it. However, the last two questions this time showed that Zhao Prince Consort viewed the nation and its people from a very high level. From the ethnic integration question, it can be seen that he doesn't view the aboriginals as first class and the rest as second class. I'm looking forward to meeting him in person." Ma Hualong's tone was a little gloomy. "In this world where looks are everything, I think he should be able to understand me. Although Zhao Prince Consort isn't handsome, he isn't ugly either." Chao Gui laughed and patted Ma Hualong's shoulder. "Didn't you see him from afar the other day? Although he looks a little fierce, he's definitely not ugly." Shui Yuanpei couldn't help but laugh. Ma Hualong was extremely ugly and had been looked down upon before. It was said that he was once recommended to Wangjing Academy by Cui Qing, a famous expert from the Yun nation, but he didn't even get to enter. Although Ma Hualong often teased himself about this, everyone knew that this was a thorn in his heart. "I wonder how they will communicate." The scholars of Wangjing Academy whispered to each other as they approached the city wall. "Just deal with it as it comes," Another person said. The people of Wangjing Academy didn't know that they had been passed by him on the train. Chang Lu walked behind them and listened to their conversation. She sneered in her heart. Fools, a bunch of fools. It's the same from top to bottom. They don't know the time and don't know the number of days. Every day, they hold on to the things left behind from thousands of years ago as the supreme truth and don't dare to go beyond the rules. You originally had the support of the imperial court, but now that the world has changed, you still hold onto those ridiculous ideas. What a bunch of fools. I believe that Zhao Prince Consort understands the situation of Wangjing Academy. Next, we just need to find an opportunity to meet that person. It's about time for someone else to take charge of Wangjing Academy. Those scholars didn't expect that Chang Lu, who had always been quite active, would actually have such an idea. Many scholars entered Lan City, and they were most curious about the street lamps that had been rumored to be there. Every 30 meters, there was a street lamp that stood on the side of the road. It was about 20 meters tall and had a glass lamp on it. Every night, these street lamps would turn Lan City into a city that never sleeps. The rumor of a city that never sleeps had long spread throughout the Yun nation. In addition, the aboriginals were really tall, strong and fierce-looking men could be seen everywhere on the streets of Lan City. This made many scholars feel somewhat uneasy while walking among them. Fortunately, they could occasionally see some merchants from the Yun nation. Chao Gui found an opportunity to approach a shopkeeper who walked out of a shop and looked at the crowd with a smile. "Shopkeeper, nice to meet you." Chao Gui cupped his fists. "Which academy are you from? Why are there so many scholars?" The shopkeeper smiled. He had come out of the shop out of curiosity after seeing these people. "I'm Chao Gui from Shaojiang Academy. The students from the 5 major academies, Salt Path, Huaya, Shuangwen, Drunken Scripture Hall, Leiteng, and Jitai Academy are all here. We are here to interact with Black Bamboo Academy." "Oh, you are students from Shaojiang Academy." The shopkeeper became more friendly after hearing this. "Is it safe to walk around Lan City now?" Chao Gui asked with a smile. "It's considered safe. Nowadays, disputes need to be resolved at the arena, and there are fewer fights than before. Furthermore, if someone were to pick a fight, not only would they be whipped, but they would also be punished to clean the public toilets. Therefore, it's fine even if you walk around alone. However, you still have to be careful not to have conflicts with others. Those simple-minded fellows won't be able to control themselves if they get angry. Although they will be severely punished afterward, we will also suffer a great loss, won't we? Therefore, don't act impulsively no matter what happens. I'm afraid that you are young and impetuous. Also, ignore those who pick a fight and look for the people from the Public Order Division. They are available on every street. Do you see that person? That uniform belongs to the Public Order Division." The shopkeeper enthusiastically explained to Chao Gui. "Thank you, shopkeeper." Chao Gui cupped his fists in gratitude. "You are representing the people of the Yun nation. Don't embarrass yourselves at Black Bamboo Academy." The shopkeeper didn't forget to remind him and whispered in his ear, "Of course, if they are really anxious, there's no harm in taking a step back." "Thank you." After thanking him again, Chao Gui hurriedly caught up with the group and told them what he had heard from the shopkeeper. The others heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing this. After all, they were under a lot of pressure in a city that was filled with human-shaped weapons. Everyone was arranged to stay near the Ministry of Rights. There was an area there that was reserved for envoys and attendants from other countries, and it was a good place for them to stay. At the same time, someone informed them that there would be an exchange the next day. However, no one knew how the exchange was going to be conducted. First, set a small goal, such as 1 second. Chapter 1038. A scholar pushed open Chao Gui's door and shouted, "Someone just came to inform us that we will be visiting Black Bamboo Academy on the first day, free activities on the second day, and lectures on the third day." Apart from Chao Gui, there were a few other scholars in the room. "Lectures?" Someone stood up and asked doubtfully. "Every academy will send one student to present their expertise. The lecture cannot be less than an hour and not more than 2 hours." Is there any specific content? No. Anything is fine as long as it's something they are good at. That's interesting. I reckon that no matter who goes on stage, they will have to face criticism from the other academies. If they are not careful, they will lose face. That's why they have to present their expertise. That's interesting. Everyone's expressions were not solemn, but they were not relaxed either. Although there was only one person on the stage, he represented the reputation of the academy. If he gave a good lecture, the entire academy would gain face. If someone were to make things difficult for him, he would lose a lot of face. Sure enough, there's no such thing as a good banquet. Someone tapped the book with a fan. It's the same. Every academy will face various situations, and it will depend on their own means. If the content of the lecture is problematic, it will definitely be criticized by others. Therefore, the content of the lecture is very important. Not many people cared about the tour. It was more or less the same for every academy. At most, there would be some differences in scale and scenery, and some academies would have some unique characteristics. However, Black Bamboo Academy, wouldn't its unique characteristic be fighting? Everyone's thoughts were on the lecture. As for the candidate, it was obvious that it would be one of the most outstanding students in each academy. Brother Chao? What are you thinking about? You seem to be distracted. Someone patted Chao Gui's shoulder. From the beginning, he had not been paying attention to the content of the conversation. Thinking of the beauty. Someone laughed. Chao Gui nodded seriously. We should be able to ask for the name of that girl tomorrow, right? Everyone burst into laughter. Everyone knew which one he was talking about. The beauty of the girl in white was indeed captivating. The next morning, everyone from Shaojiang Academy, Salt Academy, Jiangling Academy, Drunken Scripture Hall Academy, and Jitai Academy met up and headed to Black Bamboo Academy. There were more than 20 academies with more than 400 people. The time was staggered, and the fourth batch set off 2 hours later than the first batch. It's actually next to the palace. After circling around and arriving at the front of the academy, some students could not help but click their tongues when they saw the palace not far away and the huge courtyard in front of them. The two of them were too close, separated only by a martial arts arena. This was unimaginable in the Yun nation. The Empress doesn't have to worry about assassination. After all, the Empress was one of the top experts in the world. According to the latest ranking of experts, the Empress was ranked 3rd in the world. Naturally, she wouldn't be as sensitive as the other emperors. Furthermore, the name of number 1 in the world was no longer blank. It was Li Fu, an ordinary name that sounded like that of a mountain villager. Li Yuanzhu was still in 2nd place. Many people were looking forward to seeing Li Yuanzhu fight with Qi Zixiao. Although Li Yuanzhu had always been ahead of the Empress on the list, back then, when the Empress was still the 7th most powerful expert in the world, she had already killed the 5th most powerful expert in the world, Hua Sanlu. Later on, she killed the 4th most powerful expert in the world, Ting Yu. In recent years, other than the 2nd most powerful expert in the world whose situation was unknown, almost all the others were killed by the Empress. No one dared to say that Li Yuanzhu would win if the two of them fought. Your Highness. Ren Baqian, who was wearing a maroon suit, was already waiting in front of the academy. After seeing everyone, he opened his arms and said, "Welcome to Lan City." Greetings, Your Highness. Regardless of what they thought, everyone respectfully saluted. In terms of etiquette, the people of the Yun nation were much better than the aboriginals. Chao Gui saw a few men and women standing behind Ren Baqian, including the woman in white. You are all from the most famous academies in the Yun nation and the most outstanding young people in Dayo. This exchange is an opportunity for you and the students of the Black Bamboo Academy to broaden their horizons and increase their knowledge. Later, I will let the students of the academy take you on a tour to see how different it is from your academy. If you have any questions, you can ask them. You can enter all the areas, including the laboratory. A question came from behind Ren Baqian. Including the laboratory. Ren Baqian nodded and responded with a smile. In any case, they couldn't understand it. Compared to the laboratory, they were probably more interested in the library. Of course, Some of the little things in the laboratory were also very interesting. The scholars in front were a little puzzled. What was the laboratory? It sounded like it was quite important. All right, you can go ahead and have a tour. We will meet again later. Renbaqian waved his hand at the crowd. He still had other things to do after making arrangements for the students. Your Highness. An old man with white hair and a healthy rosy face stepped forward and asked, I don't know if there are any rules in Black Bamboo Academy. I'm afraid that some people will unknowingly offend the academy. The person who spoke was the dean of Jiangling Academy. You can't spit anywhere. Other than that, there's nothing else. In addition, don't disturb the students who are in class. Renbaqian waved his hand and smiled. Black Bamboo Academy was strict and lax. In terms of academics, he would frequently hang students up for target practice. Even though they wouldn't die, it was inevitable that they would suffer some injuries. This made Renbaqian no different from a devil in human skin in the student center. Other than academics, Renbaqian didn't have any requirements for the students. Whether they read comics after class or fell in love. What bothered him was why the number of students falling in love at such a young age was so low. So far, other than Du Laolu, who got married in his second year of high school, none of the other students had fallen in love at such a young age. He didn't even have a chance to show off his democracy, freedom, benevolence, and harmony. After Renbaqian left, the students behind him came forward. Shurgan stood in front, cupped his fists, and said gently, I'm Shurgan, and I've been ordered by Her Highness to bring you around the academy. You don't have to be reserved. If you have any doubts, you can ask me directly. Although Shurgan had a fierce face, a big beard, and a shaved head like the other aboriginals, he didn't look as ferocious as the others and seemed to be easy to talk to. These are my classmates, Tong Lan, Shi Yu, Chou Feng, and Tai Tianxua. Shurgan briefly introduced the rest of them. The 5 of them were enough for 5 different academies. After that, Shurgan made arrangements for them. Chao Gui was overjoyed to find out that the lady named Tong Lan, who was dressed in white, was the one accompanying Shaojiang Academy. Thank you. Ning Chongqing smiled warmly at Tong Lan. Okay, it's good that you know. So, don't run around. Tong Lan looked indifferent and didn't give them any face, which made many students a little angry. They were invited by Zhao Prince Consort to come to Black Bamboo Academy for an exchange. The person who was talking to him was the dean of Shaojiang Academy, one of the 5 great academies. How could he have such an attitude? Ning Chongqing didn't mind at all. He laughed and said, Of course not. He turned to look at the crowd and said, You are all outstanding students of the academy. I brought you here to broaden your horizons and absorb the strengths of others. Observe more in a while and ask questions if you don't understand. Don't get distracted. Dean, do you mean that since the other party's attitude isn't good, we should ask them everything we see and cause them some trouble? Many students immediately pondered and felt that they understood the meaning of the dean's words. Let's go. Tong Lan crossed her hands behind her back and led the way. This row is for offices. Yague's office is over there, so I won't take you there. The first row was an ordinary brick building, and Tong Lan simply walked past it. I'll take you to see the students who are in class. Your Highness and Lin Mengsheng are the only teachers in your academy? Chao Gui squeezed to the front of the line and asked. Chao Gui felt his heart burning even more when he smelled the fragrance left behind by Tong Lan. Tong Lan nodded slightly. How many students are there in Black Bamboo Academy? There are currently 7 academic departments and 24 classes. Each class has about 50 students, so there are more than 1,000 students in total, Tong Lan replied without turning her head. 24 classes, right? How do they teach? Chao Gui asked a question that many people wanted to ask. 2 teachers, 24 classes, and 1,200 students? You will know in a while. Tong Lan couldn't be bothered to answer this question. After walking past the first row of brick buildings, they saw classrooms from the second row onwards. There were 6 classrooms in each row, so there were a total of 6 rows around the small lake. The 3 rows on the west side of the lake were the junior high school classrooms, chemistry laboratories, infirmary, and a standalone library. The 3 rows on the east side of the lake were the high school classrooms, physics and chemistry laboratories, as well as the utility room. The university classrooms were a distance away. When they were near the first classroom, everyone heard a voice coming from it. An integral equation with 2 unknowns and the degree of the unknown term is called a quadratic binary equation. All quadratic binary equations can be transformed into. Upon hearing this voice, everyone became curious. They didn't know what was being taught as they had never heard of it before. Furthermore, since there were only 2 teachers in the academy, who was the one speaking inside? Tong Lan led everyone to the window. When everyone saw the situation in the classroom through the window, they immediately gasped. They saw a person with 2 heads and 6 hands standing in front of the stage. One of his heads was looking at the white screen in front of him, and his eyes emitted a strange glow that formed lines of words on the screen. The other head was facing the dozens of youths below. His 6 arms were holding a wooden stick, an iron ruler, a steel knife, a whip, and a slingshot. This strange scene caused everyone to be petrified in an instant. All of them widened their eyes and had no other reaction other than gasping. Set a small goal first, such as 1 second. Remember, bookseller's residence. Chapter 1039. The morning sun was scorching hot. However, everyone from the Shaojiang Academy felt a chill from head to toe. What is that? Chao Guilian couldn't maintain the smile on her face. Her eyes widened, and her fingertips trembled. Didn't you ask how the 2 teachers teach? Tong Lan was inexplicably happy when she saw everyone's reaction, and her tone became a little more provocative. Her back was facing everyone, but her eyes were slightly curved. This isn't human. A student swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and like a chain reaction, everyone present swallowed a mouthful of saliva in unison. This was nonsense. Even a blind person could tell that it wasn't human. Of course not. Tong Lan's mood was even better. She couldn't suppress the smile on her face any longer. It's a Wangliang that Yagui caught. It looks a little strange, but it's quite knowledgeable. Tong Lan rolled her eyes and blurted out, Wangliang. Everyone looked at the fellow with 2 heads, one looking in front of the other, and felt that this thing was different from the legendary Wangliang. However, everyone still believed it. Even such an inhuman thing had appeared. What else could they not believe? Everyone stood outside the window, blocking a large portion of the light. Not to mention the uniform sound of inhaling and swallowing of saliva. The students in the classroom turned their heads to look outside. Just as they turned their heads, the monster standing in front of them lashed out with the whip in his hand. But there was an explosive sound in the air. A blood-red mark immediately appeared on that student's forehead. If it was an ordinary person, this whip would have split open their flesh. That student quickly looked straight ahead and secretly used one hand to dig out some ointment from the table and apply it on his forehead. Everyone, who had just caught their breath, almost couldn't catch their breath again when they saw this scene. Everyone finally knew why the students inside were so well behaved. If they were in the Shaojiang Academy and there was a row of people standing outside, the students definitely wouldn't be in the mood to listen to the lecture. With a knife on their neck, they couldn't be disobedient even if they wanted to. Everyone suddenly felt that the days of being punished in the academy were simply like being in a fairyland. In the future, if anyone said that it wasn't easy to study hard for 10 years, they should come to the Black Bamboo Academy to take a look. After a long time, Ning Chongqing let out a long breath. Is this how you teach? This is the lightest punishment. If you are lucky, you can still see the target practice, Tong Lan said. Then she left everyone who was still in a daze and headed to the next classroom. Everyone hurriedly followed, but there were waves of tempestuous waves in their hearts. The only teachers in Black Bamboo Academy were Zhao Prince Consort and Lin Mengxing. The others were all legendary demons and ghosts? There was actually such a thing in the world, and it was even captured. These were still acceptable. After all, there had always been legends of ghosts and gods. But what was Yagui? Could it be that there was an extremely powerful demon in the Black Bamboo Academy? Tong Lan sounded so familiar. In just a few minutes, everyone had received too much information and they couldn't digest it for a while. And that terrifying teaching method. Everyone just wanted to find a place to calm down. Unfortunately, Tong Lan didn't give them a chance to digest this as she continued walking forward. When they arrived at the second classroom, everyone subconsciously looked to the front and saw an exquisite and beautiful lady. Everyone let out a long sigh of relief. Inexplicably, they felt a little more relaxed. However, halfway through this sigh of relief, the lady's eyeball suddenly shot out from her eye sockets. The eyeball, together with its flesh and blood, sprayed onto a student's head and exploded. Red, white, and black liquid splashed all over the student's head and face. Then, the lady took out an eyeball from nowhere and stuffed it back into her eye socket. She continued teaching as if nothing had happened. This scene caused everyone from Shaojiang Academy to have ashen expressions, and their entire bodies trembled without end. "Is this also a demon?" Ma Hualong asked while trembling. "This is a demon." Tong Lan suddenly felt that it wasn't such a chore to bring these people on a tour. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to see such a funny expression. Needless to say, Yagüe was getting more and more mischievous. Originally, there were some robots that were similar to humans, but after being broken twice, the current robots began to develop in the direction of a demon. Almost all of them had some functions that weren't very lethal, but were very frightening. For example, the mathematics teacher with two faces. He was staring at you almost all the time, and there were no blind spots. Coupled with the weapon in his hand, it was still quite stressful for the students. There was also this ghost-eyed lady. Her eyeballs didn't hurt when they hit the body, but they would directly explode and be covered in paint. They would have to scrub off a layer of skin if they wanted to wash it clean. Otherwise, they would have to go to school with a head full of red and green. Next up was the third classroom. This time, there wasn't even a human figure inside. It was a semicircular body with a lot of steel tentacles and an electric shock function. These are collectively known as demons and monsters. They are some strange creatures that exist in unknown places. No one knows how long they have lived. Even though they aren't humans, their knowledge isn't low. Tong Lan simply categorized these messy things into a general category. The people from the Shaojiang Academy had no choice but to suppress the fear in their hearts as well as the doubt of, why does this thing exist in an unknown place and yet possess human knowledge? They followed Tong Lan and continued to walk forward. Sure enough, they also saw some non-human creatures. Along the way, everyone only paid attention to these things. They almost didn't pay attention to other things, such as the composition of the students and what they were taught. Along the way, they saw the female students from Jitai Academy with ashen faces. Both parties looked at each other and saw that their faces were about the same. They knew that the other party must have seen those horrifying non-human creatures as well. This is the chemistry laboratory of the middle school department. When they arrived at one of the classrooms in the third row, everyone saw dozens of students standing in front of tables. There were iron cylinders, glassware, and other things on the tables. A sphere with tentacles was hanging from the ceiling, emitting an electronically synthesized voice. "Now, put a small piece of potassium into the water and see what kind of reaction it will produce." Laboratory? The laboratory that Zhao Prince Consort mentioned previously? Everyone had just become a little immune to those strange-looking teachers. The main reason was that there were too many fresh things, which diluted the impact of those demons and monsters. Just as everyone was looking curiously, they heard a student in a corner shout, "Oh no!" More than half of the students instantly hugged their heads and squatted down. Boom! A ball of purple flames exploded in that corner, and a bucket of water was blown away and splashed onto many students. "Idiot, you put such a big piece of potassium. This power is at least half the size of a palm." Tong Lan snorted gloatingly. She was too familiar with this. They had done this many times in the past. One of her dresses was also burnt. There was no need to inform the people from the clinic. When they heard the noise, they came out from the infirmary. They went in to take a look and praised, "Not bad, no one is seriously injured. Practice makes perfect." This saying is true everywhere. Everyone from Shaojiang Academy felt a toothache when they heard this. They were so familiar with hugging their heads and squatting down. Was it because of practice makes perfect? That's right. Just do it a few more times and it will be fine. Tong Lon saw through everyone's thoughts and smiled. Chapter 1040. When they arrived at the library, everyone was finally able to calm down. The things they saw just now had a huge impact on them. No one expected the Black Bamboo Academy to have so many inhuman beings. And those students, they were so proficient that it made their hearts ache. Is this how you study? Chao Gui didn't forget to strike up a conversation with Tong Lon even in this situation. He lamented in his heart that it wasn't easy for these Aboriginal students. The girl in front of him looked like she was only 18 years old. She was currently a first-year undergraduate student, which meant that she had started studying at the age of 11. Tong Lon glanced at him, which was a rare occurrence. Chao Gui felt his heart tremble when he saw Tong Lan's clear gaze. What kind of awareness do you think we have when we study? Tong Lon said in a flat tone and lowered her head. She couldn't hold it in anymore. If she wasn't in front of these people, she would have laughed hysterically. Chao Gui was in deep veneration for her. At the same time, he felt sorry for her when he saw her lowering her head. It was hard to imagine what kind of hardships an 11-year-old girl would experience in this academy. You are using your life to study. Tong Lon almost couldn't hold it in. Of course, it wasn't wrong to use one's life to study. It was just that Du Laolu, Su Peng, and a few others couldn't finish their homework or pass their exams. However, Tong Lon quickly snorted and made a dismissive expression. Take a break. You can take a walk around the library. I have something to do and have to leave. Tong Lon opened the door and smelled roasted sweet potatoes. Don't forget about this. Tong Lon didn't need to look to know who it was. There was only one person in the academy who loved roasted sweet potatoes and dared to light a fire in the library. Don't worry, it's fine. Li Fu was sitting cross-legged on the ground and didn't think much of the person who came. When he saw so many people, he specially came to the library. He didn't expect them to come as well. This is... Chao Gui and the others were curious. This person wasn't an Aboriginal. Doorman, Tong Lon said faintly. Feel free to look around. Don't damage it or take it away. I have something to do and have to leave. She left everyone behind and returned to the classroom in a flash. She smirked as she hammered the table. The expressions of those people just now were too interesting. After she left, many of the students of the academy bowed to Li Fu. Although he was a guard, he was an outsider. Being able to be a guard here meant that he was no ordinary person. If those students didn't even understand this, then they wouldn't be here. Many students were strolling around the library. Only Ning Chongqing sat beside Li Fu and sighed. My old bones can't move anymore. Li Fu glanced at him and sighed. Young people nowadays, Ning Chongqing's heart skipped a beat. He turned to look at him and found that he was still fiddling with the sweet potatoes. He didn't know if he was talking about him or the students. How should I address you, sir? Ning Chongqing probed. Don't be so genteel. It sounds awkward. Li Fu. Li Fu took out the sweet potato from the charcoal fire, and with a flick of his finger, a layer of black skin fell off. Then he stretched out his hand and slapped the air, extinguishing the pile of charcoal on the ground. Li Fu's habitual action caused Ning Chongqing's gaze to freeze. These two actions looked simple, but in fact, they were anything but. The sweet potato was soft. With a flick of his finger, the skin fell off, but the inside was unharmed. This kind of power control was not something an ordinary martial artist could achieve. And to extinguish the charcoal fire with a palm, the wind from the palm would only make the charcoal fire burn even more fiercely. Thinking of the name Li Fu, Ning Chongqing's heart trembled. Could this be the one on the ranking? Why was he here? Dean, I don't know what language this book is written in. Someone ran over with a book for Ning Chongqing to see. Ning Chongqing suppressed his bewilderment and took the book. The language was very different from today's. Although there were some similarities, there were very few differences. Another language? Where did it come from? Ning Chongqing was extremely puzzled. Nowadays, there are no such languages in several countries. Zhao Prince Consort came from several countries? Thinking of this, Ning Changqing got up and bowed to Li Fu. He hurried to the many bookshelves. Indeed, all the books were written in this language. If there were only 1 or 2 books, it was possible that Zhao Prince Consort had obtained them from somewhere else. However, all of them were written in this language, which explained some problems. There was another country outside of these countries? Zhao Prince Consort appeared in Dayo instead of one of the other 3 countries. Could that country be outside of the mountains in the west or south? While Ning Changqing was deep in thought, the others found some good things. For example, comics. Although they couldn't understand them, they found the drawings rather interesting. "Sir, may I ask what's upstairs?" Someone who couldn't understand all the books on the first floor came to Li Fu and asked with a bow. "Why don't you go up and see for yourself?" Li Fu replied casually. He wasn't a librarian and didn't care what these people were doing here. In any case, they were brought here by that little girl. After a while, an exclamation came from the second floor. "There are actually so many martial arts manuals." "What?" Someone shouted from the first floor. "The second floor is full of martial arts manuals." Upon hearing this, more than half of the students on the first floor disappeared and ran to the second floor. Although most of these students didn't have much strength, they were still quite curious about martial arts. It was a kind of curiosity that scholars had about the martial arts world. Following which, a burst of exclamations came from the second floor. There were hundreds of bookshelves on the second floor, and at least half of them were all kinds of martial arts manuals, sword techniques, all kinds of weapon moves, lightness techniques, and some secret scrolls with unique effects. Chao Gui and the other students simply couldn't take their eyes off them. "We can read all the martial arts manuals here at will?" Someone was speechless. "If I study here, maybe I can become an expert," someone couldn't help but say. Very soon, someone poured cold water on him and said, "You have to survive first." Thinking about what they saw just now, everyone suddenly shuddered. Chao Gui ignored the words of the others and looked for a cultivation method that he was interested in to carefully study it. Even if he couldn't memorize everything and couldn't practice, it would be good to learn by analogy. One had to know that the martial arts manuals here were 10 times more than those in the big sections. If he missed this opportunity, he was afraid that he wouldn't have such a good opportunity again. After staying inside for 15 minutes, they heard a commotion downstairs and saw that people from other academies had arrived. Tong Lan also appeared at the right time and said, "Go outside and rest for a while. I will show you the laboratory and other places later." Chao Gui had no choice but to put the book back in its original place reluctantly. It was rare that he didn't pay attention to Tong Lan. Instead, he focused all his attention on recalling the secret scroll that he had just read. The other students didn't have any objections. After all, they had suffered too much today and suffered too many fright. Indeed, they should rest for a while. Baidu search 881 Chinese network yen. No advertising words. Chapter 1041. Everyone was resting by the lake, but they couldn't calm down. Soon, the topic shifted back to those teachers. Black Bamboo Academy's teaching methods were terrifying, and so were the books in the library. Everyone could understand this. However, the existence of those teachers gave them a fright. This was what they were most concerned about after they came back to their senses. Those inhuman beings. Tong Lan felt very comfortable as she listened to everyone's conversation. It was so fun to tease these people. She didn't have this opportunity in the past. Ning Changqing walked to Tong Lan's side and sat down with a smile. "Today was really an eye-opener for us." Tong Lan was a little hesitant on how to answer. Ning Changqing didn't wait for her to answer and asked with a smile, "Is the old teacher in the library the one on the list?" "You know about it?" Tong Lan thought for a while and said, "Thanks to him, nothing in the academy has ever been lost. With him around, who could steal?" Ning Changqing confirmed his guess and smiled bitterly. It was indeed him. Such a person was actually a gatekeeper at Black Bamboo Academy. She let out a long sigh and asked again, "What did you learn?" Chinese, mathematics, chemistry, and physics. Tong Lan counted with her fingers and realized that there were only 4 subjects. There were many more subjects in the library, such as sociology, psychology, architecture, poetry, medicine, education, materials, agriculture, philosophy, law, manufacturing, economics. There were too many. At this thought, Tong Lan felt that the academic curriculum wasn't important anymore. To learn everything, even those perverts with swords on their backs couldn't do it. Ning Chongqing was a little interested and asked, "What are these subjects? Can you explain in detail? I'm very interested." Tong Lan raised her eyebrows impatiently. However, seeing that these people had brought her so much fun, she suppressed her eyebrows and said calmly, "Chinese is literacy, and mathematics is algebra. You also have to learn the arithmetical classic, right? It's similar to the arithmetical classic. As for physics, it's the various phenomena of nature, the structure of matter, the interaction of matter, and the law of motion of matter." Ning Chongqing interrupted Tong Lan and asked, "The matter you mentioned, everything in the world can be touched or not. As long as it exists, it's all there. Whether it's soil, stones, trees, flowers, birds, beasts, the air we breathe, the clouds and lightning in the sky, or the ice and snow on the peaks, it's all there." When Ning Chongqing heard the other party's words, his eyes were filled with shock. The surrounding students who were attracted by the conversation couldn't help but say, "Isn't this the great Tao of heaven and earth?" That's what Yagüe said back then. Tong Lan thought about it carefully. That's not wrong. In the eyes of others, it was the great Tao of heaven and earth. However, in the eyes of the students of the Black Bamboo Academy, it was subdivided into different things. Absolute silence. Learn the great Tao of heaven and earth? It's not as powerful as you think. Tong Lan was thin-skinned, so she explained, "For example, why do fruits fall from the tree? Don't fall into the sky? It fell vertically? Because the earth is below?" Someone asked subconsciously. "Then why did it fall down?" Tong Lan asked. Everyone, not many people had thought of such a logical question. "But this is what we are learning," Tong Lan said faintly. She had no intention of explaining to everyone. The problem seemed simple to her, but the people of the academy began to scratch their ears and cheeks. Why was that? In the past, no one had asked about it, so they didn't feel it. Now that someone had mentioned it, they felt like a feather was scratching their hearts. "Young friend, I'm also very curious. I hope you can enlighten me." Ning Chongqing couldn't help but say. Tong Lan then explained, "The earth has gravity. Every object in the world has gravity, and this is one of the few fundamental forces in the world." When everyone heard the words, "one of the few fundamental forces in the world," they immediately felt that it was amazing. Even the people who were chatting stopped talking and gathered behind Tong Lan to listen to her. Since every object in the world has gravity, why is it not sucked up to the tree but to the ground? Shui Yuanpei asked with a cold face. Although he didn't fully understand, he immediately found a flaw in Tong Lan's words. The strength of gravity is related to mass. The earth has the greatest mass, so it will fall to the earth. Tong Lan thought about it but didn't say that the world was a sphere. After all, this was only mentioned in the book. It only said that the earth had the greatest mass, so it produced the greatest gravity. Seeing that everyone still didn't understand, Tong Lan asked, "Why does the world revolve around the sun?" Everyone from the academy was immediately puzzled. Doesn't the sun rise in the east and set in the west? Tong Lan was instantly speechless. She suddenly realized that there were many things that couldn't be explained to these people. If she wanted to explain, even 3 days and 3 nights wouldn't be enough. In the end, she gave up with a headache and said, "If you have studied physics, you will know. It is too troublesome for me to explain this to you." Someone suddenly said, "You're not trying to scare us, are you? Otherwise, why can't you explain it?" There was a moment of silence. Tong Lan's face instantly turned ice cold. She flashed into the air, looked for the person who spoke just now, and wanted to step on him. "I explained it to you with good intentions, but you actually doubt me? Miss Tong, please calm down. I didn't mean it." Chao Gui managed to keep up with Tong Lan's speed. He cupped his fists in front of Tong Lan and smiled bitterly. Actually, I can't explain it myself, the scholar who spoke just now said in a low voice. He sounded very unconvinced. Tong Lan's face immediately turned ashen. You guys are too ignorant. It's a waste of time to explain to you guys. Tong Lan was furious as she spoke in a disdainful tone. At this moment, many of the Shaojiang Academy's students also revealed angry expressions. The Shaojiang Academy was one of the 5 academies in the Yun Nation, and they were the best of the best. How could they not be treated with respect? With just one sentence, you've condemned everyone as ignorant, yet you can't give a reason for it. How can anyone be convinced? How could he not be angry? Why don't you tell us? Are we ignorant, or are you lying? You don't have much knowledge, but you do have a big temper. Upon hearing everyone's words, Tong Lan felt as though she was about to erupt with anger. Since young, who had ever doubted him like this? What's more, he was only telling them out of kindness. Otherwise, he wouldn't even bother with them. Who would have thought that he would be questioned as nonsense by them? Tong Lan's delicate little face turned ashen. She was so angry that her hair was fluttering in the wind. All of you, shut up, Ning Chongqing bellowed. Then he cupped his fists at Tong Lan and said, Young friend, I'm already so old, and I'm only half a step away from entering the coffin. However, these students are all young and impetuous. If they have offended you, please don't take it to heart. Then his tone changed. However, if you don't explain, I'm afraid that these disciples will not be convinced and think that you're lying. Not only will it affect you, but it will also affect Zhao Prince Consort's reputation. Tong Lan's chest heaved a few times, and she glared at everyone fiercely. She was extremely angry, but she had to suppress her anger. At the same time, she knew that if she didn't explain to everyone, there would really be gossip about the Black Bamboo Academy. However, it wasn't easy to explain. Just the fact that the world was round was enough to argue with them for a long time. After thinking for a while, she said in a gloomy tone, Have you seen a ship go out to sea and return? If you haven't seen it before, then it's useless for me to explain it to you. I've seen it before, someone immediately said. Half of the 20 people in the Yun Nation had seen it before. What's the last thing a ship sees when it goes out to sea? What's the first thing a ship sees when it returns? The mast. Many students thought for a while and replied immediately. That's right. Tong Lan raised her head and looked at everyone with a condescending expression. Why are the red and yellow moons sometimes round and sometimes curved? Have you noticed it? Does this have anything to do with what you said just now? Although everyone didn't know the reason, they immediately objected. Of course, Tong Lan replied arrogantly. You all know about the dim moon, right? The dim moon was a scene where 2 parts of the moon overlapped and intersected. It usually happened once every 10 years or so. During the dim moon, the 2 moons overlapped, and the moon was also missing a corner. Due to the time period, the process was very clear. When compared to the usual moon, it was very obvious. When Ning Chongqing heard Tong Lan mention the dim moon, he suddenly remembered an interesting story he had heard before. He raised his head and stared at Tong Lan. Do you mean that the world is round? Baidu search 881 Chinese network yen. No advertising words. Chapter 1042. Do you mean that the world is round? Tong Lan looked at him in surprise. She didn't expect him to react so quickly. The world was round, which contradicted most people's understanding. How is that possible? How can the world be round? Many people subconsciously refuted. Even though the person in front of them was their dean, saying that the world was round was too sensational. That's right, the world is a ball. Tong Lan shrugged her shoulders. Then, she looked at the other students contemptuously and said, He is much smarter than all of you. His words made everyone choke to death. They wanted to scold him, but he was the dean of the academy. However, they couldn't agree with the conclusion that the world was round. Not to mention that it was a ball. If it's a ball, why didn't we fall when we were standing on it? Someone questioned immediately. This ball has gravity. As mentioned just now, gravity is everywhere as one of the fundamental forces of this world. However, the greater the mass of an object, the greater the gravity. One of the fundamental forces of the world? What do you mean? Gravity, electromagnetic force, weak interaction force, strong interaction force. Of course, you won't understand even if I explain. Tong Lan snorted softly. She hated doing useless things. She didn't like the people of the Yun nation either. However, she also didn't like being questioned. Everyone thought that it would be thunder and lightning or time, but they couldn't understand the words that Tong Lan said at all. They only knew about gravity after Tong Lan explained it to them just now. Dean, why did you say that the world is round? Ma Hualong asked Ning Chongqing respectfully. He really respected Ning Chongqing. He was rejected by the Wangjing Academy back then and was filled with grief and indignation. If Ning Chongqing hadn't accepted him into the Shaojiang Academy, he didn't know what would have happened to him. He only knew that he was indebted to the dean. Ning Chongqing stroked his beard and said, "Someone had such a guess? Or rather, many people had such a guess." He had always been non-committal about this guess and treated it as a joke. When he heard Tong Lan mention the mast and the dim moon, he immediately thought of it. There are still smart people, but unfortunately, they aren't you. Tong Lan really didn't have a good expression on her face. She was as cold as ice and her words were always sarcastic, which made everyone extremely angry. When a ship goes out to sea, the last thing to disappear is the mast. When a ship returns, the first thing to appear is the mast. This proves one thing. The surface of the sea looks flat, but it is actually curved. It was the same for the red and yellow moons. When the dim moon appeared, the red moon blocked a part of the yellow moon. But what was the difference between the yellow moon and the one he usually saw? Not at all. This is because after the sun sets, it will be on the other side of this world. The world will block a portion of the sunlight, so there will be a crescent moon. That's impossible. The dim moon is because the yellow moon's radiance was blocked by the red moon. Someone immediately refuted. Tong Lan seemed to be amused by these words. The ice and snow melted away, leaving a wide smile on her face. Yellow moon radiance? You probably don't even know what the moon is, do you? And how do you explain the curve of the sea? Although the crowd found it hard to answer, someone immediately shouted, "In the end, it's all just a guess. You don't have any concrete evidence, so you just treat it as a theory. No matter what, I don't believe that the world is round." Tong Lan frowned slightly. This bunch of stubborn fellows. How can the students of the Shaojiang Academy be so unreasonable? You don't have enough evidence. Just the curve of the sea can't explain everything. Chao Gui couldn't help but take a step forward. No matter what, he couldn't accept the other party belittling the academy. However, after he finished speaking, he turned to look at the crowd and said, "Let Miss Tong finish speaking. Where have all the years of studying gone?" Tong Lan rubbed her brows and said, "Like I said before, you don't know what the moon is. Do you think the moon can emit light? In fact, the moon is just a huge stone ball. Can a stone emit light? In the dark, if a stone is placed on the ground, can you see it? You can only see it when there is light. As for the specific reason, it involves the principle of light. However, if you think about it, you will understand. If the moon can't emit light, then the sun is on the other side of the world. Part of the light is blocked by the world, while the other part shines on the red and yellow moons. That's why you see the crescent moon. It's precisely because the world is round that you can see the crescent moon. Even so, maybe the world is like a plate and can't be considered round. Therefore, there is also the curve of the sea and the curve of the Earth's surface. Adding these 2 points can prove some things." Tong Lan explained frantically. Meanwhile, Shi Yu and the rest of the people from the Jitai Academy had also arrived. "What are you guys discussing?" Shi Yu asked curiously. "Telling them that the world is a ball." Tong Lan looked depressed. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have said so much. In the end, so many things were involved. The world is round? These words caused many girls from the Jitai Academy to exclaim in surprise. Sure, you saw Tong Lan's embarrassed look and found it a little funny. Ignoring the people from the Jitai Academy, he said to Tong Lan, "Can't you just let them see the curve of the earth with their own eyes? In the sky? They can see the curve of the earth." The two academy students were immediately attracted by this sentence. You mean they can go to the sky? How do they go up? What does the sky look like? Let me help you ask. Borrow old Lee's hot air balloon, and he can take you to the sky. Sure, you smiled at everyone. That's his lifeblood. Tong Lan snorted. He's not that stingy. Also, don't forget that we are researching airplanes. That kind of hot air balloon has already been eliminated. Sure, you patted Tong Lan's arm and said. At the side, the people from the Shaojiang Academy were still telling the people from the Jitai Academy about the world is a ball matter. After all, there were many girls from the Jitai Academy, and they all had an intellectual aura about them. This inevitably made the students from the other academies a little enthusiastic. Sure, you turned his head to take a look, stood beside Tong Lan, and said, I heard that there will be a lecture in the next few days. All the academies will send people to give lectures. Yagüe didn't say anything to us, but we can talk about the world being round. I'm afraid those people will explode again. Tong Lan snorted. She already found it troublesome to deal with a few dozen people, let alone a few hundred. Do you think they won't tell the students from the other academies when they return? Sure, you laughed. Although he wasn't as exquisite as Tong Lan, he was still superior. There were no ugly girls in the aboriginals. When the people on the other side were almost done and finally quietened down, Tong Lan said expressionlessly, Go back and ask if you can take a look at the sky. There's no point talking about this topic now. Today's tour isn't over yet. Let's go. Other than the academies, there were various laboratories and workshops. These laboratories were different from the chemistry laboratories that were used to teach students about chemical reactions. The laboratories at the back were all places where new technology was being developed. Although the most advanced technology was in the laboratory on Mount Termination, where there were hundreds of scholars and dozens of sword masters that Rinpoche had kidnapped from Earth, the things that the laboratories in the academy were researching weren't simple either. For example, airplanes. The progress of airplanes in Mount Termination, including the engine and other technical reserves, as well as the overall design of airplanes, had roughly reached the level of World War II. However, the students in the academy were also researching their own airplanes. Of course, the engine blueprints were provided by the laboratory on Mount Termination. Even so, the things that these students accomplished were enough to put most people to shame. Baidu search 081 Chinese network yen. Yen. Chapter 1043. The current Black Bamboo Academy was no longer as shabby as it used to be. Over the past 7 or 8 years, it had expanded almost every year, and its area had expanded by more than 10 times. The artificial lake in the backyard had long become the front yard. The Black Bamboo Forest, which gave the academy its name, had now become a part of the academy's scenery. After passing the artificial lake, there was a piece of flat land, followed by many classrooms, and then the Black Bamboo Forest. After passing through the artificial lake, there were workshops for blacksmiths, carpenters, pottery, and a small glass workshop. Although there were only 4 workshops, the area was very large, much larger than the previous classrooms and the artificial lake. The students of other academies had never built workshops in the academy. After all, these industries had nothing to do with the academy. However, this was the specialty of the Black Bamboo Academy. The students were responsible for designing, thinking, and even assembling, while the craftsmen were responsible for turning some of their ideas into reality. Nowadays, there weren't many students here, but the workshops weren't idle either. Clanging sounds were non-stop, sparks were flying in the blacksmith workshop, and sawdust was flying in the carpenter workshop. We have an idea for these workshops. After designing the blueprints and measurements, we will hand them over to them to make the actual products. Sometimes they can't understand, so we have to help them make the products on the spot. Tong Lan pointed at the workshops on both sides as she walked quickly. Although she didn't want to pay attention to the students, They didn't let her off and kept asking questions along the way. Ning Changqing, in particular, was extremely interested in the courses in the academy even though he didn't comment on it. He discovered a problem. The things in the Black Bamboo Academy were completely different from the other academies. The students of the other academies only had to study, but the students of the Black Bamboo Academy had to do many other things besides studying. You will know in a while. Tong Lan was too lazy to explain further. She brought everyone to the experimental area. Everyone looked up and saw a row of brick buildings that were similar to the classrooms in front of them. On both sides, there were several huge storehouses. They didn't look special from the outside. "This is the laboratory," Tong Lan said as they walked. Everyone immediately knew that this was the main point. "What are they doing here?" "Experimenting and designing some new things." Tong Lan led everyone past the laboratories and saw that they were full of cabinets and tables, and there were many papers scattered on them. "Can I take a look?" Ning Changqing asked. "You can only look and not touch. Don't mess up the things inside," Tong Lan said expressionlessly. Ning Changqing nodded, walked in, and went straight to the stack of papers scattered on the table. He saw that they were all blueprints of unknown objects, and they were all labeled with detailed sizes. However, he did see a few relatively complete designs, or rather, imaginative designs. There was a complete picture on it. The objects in the picture had the body of a flying insect or a bird, and there were words that he could not understand next to them. Lifting his head and looking around, he saw huge shelves filled with dossiers. On the table by the window, there were a few wooden models, which were the items on the scrolls. "What is this?" Tong Lan crossed her arms and leaned against the door. She looked at everyone walking around and replied expressionlessly, "A plane with a passenger." "It can carry people? Fly into the sky?" Ning Changqing was extremely interested. No matter which world you are in, flying freely in the sky is one of the dreams of mankind. "Of course. Where is it? Have you made it?" "I'm very surprised. The things in your academy have really broadened my horizons." The old man smiled and praised them. If it was someone else who said that they could fly into the sky, he might not believe it. However, in this academy led by Zhao Prince Consort, it might become a reality. After all, they could make calls from thousands of miles away. There was even a telephone in the Shaojiang Academy, which was installed by a graduate of the academy. "It's in the warehouse," Tong Lan said casually. "It's not difficult to fly into the sky." The others were speechless. What a big tone. Furthermore, why was the Black Bamboo Academy doing things that seemed like a fantasy to others? What was the world like a ball? What was a plane that could carry people into the sky? For this world, the Black Bamboo Academy was way ahead of its time. Therefore, when people learned about the Ancient Race Academy, they did not feel respect. Instead, they felt suspicious and strange. One step ahead was a great man with great foresight, while 2 steps ahead was a lunatic who raved. The Black Bamboo Academy, which was at the forefront of this world, was obviously that lunatic. When they passed by the 3rd classroom, Tong Lan saw a box with a wire attached to it. She rolled her eyes, and her face finally showed some expression. The corners of her mouth curled up as if she had thought of something fun. "Do you want me to take a photo for you?" "Photo?" Everyone was puzzled. Tong Lan took out a stack of hard and smooth paper from a table and showed it to everyone. "This is it." Everyone saw that there were pictures on the paper. There were trees, houses, purple bamboo forests, and a small lake. Almost all the scenes that they had seen in the academy appeared on the paper. Moreover, unlike paintings, the images on the paper seemed to contain scenes from reality. Other than the color being black and white, it was almost the same as reality. "What is this?" Everyone was surprised. Photo paper, or rather, photo paper, can record everything in reality. It won't change even after 10 or 100 years. Tong Lan tried her best to look serious, but her expression was slightly strange. Anyone who was familiar with her would immediately know that she was up to no good. Although she was always very arrogant, Tong Lan was also an 18-year-old girl. She was lively and quick-witted, but only people who were familiar with her would see this side of her. What are these? Thank you. Ning Changqing stroked his beard and smiled. He really wanted to see what he would look like in the so-called photo. Okay, stand properly. I'll get ready. Tong Lan took out the box. She pointed the camera at everyone and connected it to the wires. She looked up at everyone who had stood properly according to her instructions and pressed the shutter. After taking 3 photos in a row, Tong Lan nodded in satisfaction. Done. She then took out a photo from behind her. On it was a picture of a student from the academy with 6 arms. He looked very lifelike. This will be the effect after the image is taken. Everyone exclaimed, "It's just like the real thing." Of course it's real. His soul has been captured in here. As long as this photo is torn, he will die. Tong Lan finally revealed her fangs. She had an undisguised smile on her face as if she had finally succeeded. It was exactly the same as the negative characters in the comics. She had learned it from them. In an instant, everyone was stunned. They felt as if a basin of ice water had been poured over their heads. Your thoughts? Many of the Academy scholars were stunned for a moment before their expressions changed drastically. That's right. Why do you think this thing is the same as the real thing? Because it's the real thing. After this soul-capturing camera takes a photo, your soul will be captured in it. Tong Lan felt very carefree when she saw everyone's expression turn into one of horror. In the future, if Yagüe asks you to go west, you can't go east. If he asks you to catch a dog, you can't catch a chicken. Otherwise, as long as the photo is torn, your soul will fly away and scatter. Who is Yagüe? Zhao Prince's consort. He is an evil spirit in human skin. Otherwise, why do you think we always talk about Yagüe? This time, everyone was even more frightened. Demoness! Why did you do such a thing? Many people's faces turned green. Tong Lan felt that she should find a place to laugh again. She laughed heartily in her heart. Idiots! However, there were a few people who didn't have much of a change in their expressions. Ning Changqing even laughed. This young lady was rather interesting. He didn't believe that the soul would be captured on the photo. Humans had souls. Did those trees and stones have souls as well? Furthermore, if that was the case, why did she say it now? Did she trick them here just to take a photo? Why go through so much trouble? Tong Lan's thoughts turned extremely fast. Do you think that trees and stones don't have souls? Everything in the world has souls. As Tong Lan spoke, the photo was an image of a wall. Tong Lan tore the photo a little and revealed a strange smile to everyone. As long as I tear the photo, everyone stared intently at her hands. Many of them broke out in cold sweat. Boom! Suddenly, a loud sound erupted nearby. Gravel flew everywhere. Although it wasn't far away, it was separated by a courtyard. Tong Lan was also startled by this loud sound. Her hands trembled and she tore the photo. She immediately identified that it was most likely an explosion in the university's laboratory. However, she almost couldn't hold back her laughter. She was too cooperative. Everyone looked at the torn photo in her hands and then at the thick smoke not far away. Their faces turned completely green. Even the faces of Chao Gui and the others changed. First, set a small goal. For example, 1 second. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.